Hello, this is Whispers in the Rain. Welcome to tonight's scary story reading, one to keep you company as the storm rolls in. If you enjoy my stories, please do like and subscribe. Comment where you're listening from and what time it is where you are. Let the rain drown the noise of the outside world, and let the darkness take over from here. Walls. Just the slow tick of the antique clock above the mantel and the low creak of old wood beneath her weight. The landlord had barely looked her in the eye when she signed the lease earlier that morning. He'd kept glancing toward the stairwell, his fingers twitching as she read over the contract. "You're sure this place hasn't been rented for a while?" she'd asked, raising a brow. "Long while," he muttered. "People come and go. Never stay." Claire gave him a confused look, but he just thrust the pen into her hand. "It's quiet here," he added quickly. "You said you liked quiet." She had said that. After everything with Marcus and the chaos of the last few months, Claire wanted nothing more than silence. Something stable, unmoving. The place, with its crooked crown molding and clawfoot tub, was cheap, hidden, and just remote enough. It felt like a fresh start. That first night, she left the window cracked open and fell asleep to the whisper of wind through the trees outside. There was a faint hum in the walls, not like electricity, but almost like a breath, deep and slow. She told herself it was just the age of the place. Old homes made noises, and she'd learn them all in time. At 2:13 a.m., she woke suddenly, not to any specific sound, but with a distinct feeling that something had happened. She sat up slowly, eyes scanning the darkened room. The street lamp cast a slanted beam across the floorboards. Nothing seemed out of place. She pulled her blanket tighter and was just about to lie back down when she heard it. Knock. A single, soft tap. It came from inside the closet. Claire froze. She waited, breath caught in her throat. No more sounds followed. Just the wind beyond the window and the soft hum in the walls. Probably just settling wood, she told herself. Old apartments always creaked and groaned. It wasn't anything. Still, she didn't open the closet. Claire told herself it was nothing. She had to. That soft knock could have been the building shifting, maybe a pipe. Nothing to worry about. Still, she stayed awake for a while longer, listening. By morning, the fear felt foolish. The sunlight spilled through the cracked blinds, warming the hardwood floor, and she shook her head at her paranoia. First night jitters, she thought. The apartment looked less haunted in the daylight. There was charm here. Stained glass transom windows, faded wallpaper with delicate ivy patterns, and a fireplace that probably hadn't worked in decades but gave the room a cozy illusion. She spent the day unpacking. She took her time arranging things just right. Books on the windowsill, her tea set on the chipped kitchen counter, a worn armchair next to the fire. A few framed photographs. Her and her sister as kids, her mom's old wedding picture, a black and white snapshot of her and Marcus smiling on the shore of some lake she no longer remembered the name of. By dusk, it already felt more like home. She made a simple dinner, noodles and some wine, then curled up with a book. The hum in the walls was back, just beneath hearing range. It reminded her of a refrigerator motor or the distant sound of someone whispering from another room. She slept lightly, and again, at exactly 2:13 a.m., she woke. Eyes open, heart pounding. Not knock. 2 soft raps. Deliberate. Not like settling wood or random thuds. A rhythm. A message. They came from the same place, the closet across from her bed. Claire sat up slowly. The knock had been louder this time. She squinted through the shadows, making out the door's outline. It was shut, just as she'd left it. She reached for her phone. 2:13 a.m. The air felt thick, heavy with silence. She slid out of bed barefoot, each floorboard groaning under her weight as she tiptoed across the room. Her hand hovered over the doorknob. Then, with a breath, she opened the closet. Empty. Of course it was. Just her suitcase lying on the floor, half unpacked. A wire hanger clinking against the rod. She stood there for a moment, goosebumps rising along her arms, and shut it again. Back in bed, Claire stared at the ceiling, trying to convince herself she'd imagined it. But she didn't sleep the rest of the night. Claire spent the next day in a fog of exhaustion. Her coffee tasted sour, and the hum in the apartment now felt more noticeable. not louder, but more present, like it was aware of her listening. She Googled things like phantom knocks at night and old building noises, scrolling through forums filled with skeptics and self-proclaimed ghost hunters. None of it helped. Most responses suggested rats, pipes, or wind. But Claire had lived in old buildings before. She knew those sounds. This was different. That night, she set a chair in front of the closet door before climbing into bed. She wasn't trying to block it. Exactly. Just keep it from opening easily. It made her feel a little more in control. She left a lamp on this time. Sleep came harder. She lay curled on her side, watching the warm pool of light on the wooden floor until her eyes blurred. At some point, the hum in the walls lulled her into a shallow sleep. Until, once again, 2:13 a.m., a soft, dragging noise scraped through her dreams and woke her. Her eyes fluttered open, dry and aching. Scrape. That chair, the one she'd pushed up against the closet, was sliding across the floor, slowly, as though someone on the other side was pushing. She didn't move, didn't even breathe, just stared, wide-eyed, at the dim outline of the chair in the lamplight as it shifted a few inches more. Then the knock came. Knock, knock, knock. 3 this time, and louder. Claire sat upright in bed, her pulse hammering in her ears. The knocking stopped, but the air in the room had changed. Heavier, closer. She could almost feel the presence just beyond the closet door, like something listening. For several minutes, she didn't move. Finally, trembling, she rose and crossed the floor. The chair now sat a foot from where she had placed it. She bent down slowly and pressed her ear to the door. Silence. Then, very faint, almost playful, came a whisper from inside. Too low to make out the words, but definitely a voice. Claire stepped back in horror, her mouth dry. The door didn't move. The knob didn't rattle, but she didn't dare open it. Not this time. Claire barely slept the rest of the night. She kept her eyes fixed on the closet door, her body rigid beneath the covers. The lamp stayed on, casting shadows that seemed to stretch and move with every flicker of the bulb. Every few minutes, she thought she heard that faint whisper again, though it never formed real words, just a murmur of something waiting. By morning, her nerves were frayed. Her hand trembled as she reached for her phone and dialed the landlord's number. He answered on the second ring. "Hello, it's Claire, the new tenant from 3B. A long pause. "Yes," he said slowly. "You're calling about the closet, aren't you?" Claire felt her skin go cold. "You knew. I didn't think it would start so soon," he murmured. "Usually it waits a week. Maybe 2. "What is it?" she demanded, gripping the phone tighter. "Someone knocked last night. 3 times. And I heard something whispering." "Did you open the door?" he asked sharply. "No." "Good." He let out a shaky breath. "Did you see the note I left?" There was no note. In the kitchen. Top drawer, near the sink. Claire went silent. I'll check," she said at last. "Do it now," he urged. "Call me back if it's not there." She hung up, then walked slowly into the kitchen. Morning light filtered weakly through the sheer curtains, casting a pale glow over the old linoleum floor. Her feet felt leaden as she stepped to the drawer. She opened it. Nothing but a few rubber bands, an old spoon, and a folded piece of yellowed paper, creased so many times the edges curled inward like brittle leaves. With fingers that didn't feel like her own, she opened it. The handwriting was uneven, rushed, and faded. "If it knocks more than 3 times, do not answer. If it speaks, do not listen. If you see it, run." Claire read it twice, then a third time. Her legs nearly gave out beneath her. What the hell had she moved into? The words from the note echoed in Claire's mind as she paced the living room, holding the paper like it might burn through her fingers. She wanted to call the landlord back, demand answers, but what would she even say? "You left me a cryptic warning about my closet, and now I'm terrified to sleep in my own home?" He'd already told her more than he probably should have. She tucked the note into a book on the shelf, something thick and forgettable, then stood in the hallway, staring at the closed bedroom door. No knocks during the day, no voices. It only came at night. She thought about packing a bag and leaving. A hotel, just for one night. But something kept her rooted to the spot. Curiosity, maybe, or stubbornness, or fear that it would follow her. That evening, she stayed out late, wandering the aisles of a grocery store she didn't need to be in, lingering over displays of tea and cereal. Anything to avoid going back too soon. When she finally returned, the building loomed quiet and dark. Inside, the apartment greeted her like a mausoleum. Cold, still, as if it had been waiting. She turned on every light, opened every door, including the closet. Still empty. No sign of disturbance. The chair was where she'd left it, this time folded and leaned against the wall. Still, she didn't sleep. She curled up on the couch, fully dressed, a small kitchen knife tucked under a blanket beside her. The living room felt safer, less intimate, less vulnerable. 2:13 a.m. came quietly. No knocks this time. Instead, a voice soft, slow, and unbearably close. "Claire, why did you move the chair?" She froze. The voice hadn't come from the bedroom. It had come from the hallway, right outside the living room. Claire didn't breathe. She didn't move. Her eyes scanned the shadows near the hallway entrance. Nothing was there, but the air felt thicker now, heavier, as if something unseen had entered the room. Then came the sound of footsteps. Slow, careful, crossing the floor between the hallway and the couch. Claire squeezed the knife handle in her hand. Her heart hammered. The voice whispered again. "You saw the note, didn't you?" She wanted to scream, but her throat was too tight. The footsteps stopped just a few feet away, though she still saw no one. And then silence. Claire didn't sleep the rest of the night. She stayed curled up on the couch, barely blinking, waiting for the voice or the footsteps to return. But after that last whisper, the apartment had gone still again. Not peaceful. Never peaceful, but watching. Listening. When the pale blue of dawn finally crept through the windows, she stood slowly, her limbs stiff from tension and cold. She moved through the apartment, checking everything. The closet door was shut, the bedroom undisturbed. Nothing missing, nothing out of place, except her reflection. In the hallway mirror, just for a second, Claire thought she saw someone standing behind her. A man, thin, motionless, his face blurred. But when she spun around, the hallway was empty. She grabbed her coat and bolted out the door. The landlord lived in the building next door, in an old brownstone with a sagging porch. Claire knocked hard, and when he answered, he looked like he hadn't slept in weeks. "I need answers," she said. Her voice was trembling with barely controlled panic. "You knew. That thing, it knows my name." The landlord swallowed. "Comin." His apartment was filled with dusty furniture and faded family portraits. He led her to the kitchen and poured 2 cups of coffee, his hands shaking. For a moment, he didn't speak, just stared at the steam curling from his mug. "I wasn't supposed to rent it anymore," he said at last. 3B. That unit's been wrong for a long time. "What does it want?" Claire asked. "It only comes at night. Always at 2:13. The knocking started small, but now it's talking. It's in the hallway now." The landlord winced. "It doesn't stay in the closet forever. Once you hear your name, it means it's moved closer. You need to be careful." "Careful of what?" He looked her dead in the eye. "Of answering. That's what it wants. A response. Once you speak to it, it has a way in." Claire felt cold settle in her chest. "How do I stop it?" He looked down at his mug, then at the window like he was listening for something. "You don't. You can only avoid it. Never open the door after the 3rd knock. Never talk back. And whatever you do, don't let it touch you." Claire stood slowly. "You said people come and go. What happened to the last one?" The landlord was silent for a long time. Then he whispered, "We never found her." Claire left the landlord's apartment with a chill beneath her skin that no amount of sunshine could shake. She walked for hours, aimlessly through neighborhoods she didn't know, trying to decide what to do next. Could she just leave? Pack up, disappear, and forget she ever stepped foot inside that place? The idea tempted her, but there was something about the apartment that held her, a feeling like she was tied to it now, bound, that leaving would only postpone what was already in motion. As she returned, the building looked more sinister in the afternoon light. The windows on her floor seemed darker than the rest, hollow and watchful. She hesitated outside her door, keys shaking in her hand. Inside, the air was colder than before. She dropped her bag and checked every room again. Her bedroom was still. The closet shut. No signs of forced entry. No disturbances. Except for one new detail. On the inside of the closet door, just at eye level, were 3 long, vertical scratches, thin gouges dragged down the wood, deep enough to catch her fingertip. She hadn't seen them before. Claire backed away and closed the door slowly, a sick feeling rising in her throat. That evening, she refused to enter the bedroom at all. She cooked dinner and ate standing in the kitchen, glancing over her shoulder every few seconds. She placed a small mirror on the coffee table so she could watch the hallway behind her without turning around. Every time she looked, it was empty, but her reflection never felt alone. When night came, Claire fortified herself in the living room. Pillows, blankets, a flashlight, the kitchen knife. The note was folded in her pocket, a sort of charm, though it offered no comfort. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "I know you're awake." She stared at the screen, hands trembling. Then came another. "Don't ignore me, Claire. That's rude." The phone slipped from her fingers and clattered to the floor. And then, on cue, knock, 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 knock. This time, from the front door. Claire stood motionless, staring at the door. The knock had been firm, too real, not like the soft taps from the closet nights before. This came from something or someone with weight, with purpose. Her phone buzzed again. "Don't make me come in." She moved slowly, silently, across the room, stepping over the fallen phone. The chain lock was on. She looked through the peephole. Nothing. Just the hallway, dimly lit by the flickering bulb overhead. No footsteps, no shadows, no one. Knock, knock, knock. Again, harder this time. The door rattled in its frame. Claire stumbled backward. She wanted to scream, to run, but her voice was trapped behind her teeth. She grabbed the flashlight, flicked it on, and swept the beam across the room like it might burn the shadows away. Then the lock slid. She hadn't touched it. The chain lock, which she had just checked, now hung limp on the side of the door. The knob turned once. Slowly, Claire lunged forward, shoving her shoulder against the door and relatching the chain with trembling fingers. The knob stopped turning. Silence followed, deep and suffocating. Then came the whisper from the other side. "You left the closet open." Claire's breath caught. "No," she thought. "No, I closed it. I know I did." The voice was male, dry and hoarse, but with a horrible softness, like someone whispering through cotton. She backed away from the door, eyes wide, hands trembling. The room suddenly felt smaller, as though the walls were inching inward. She turned toward the hallway. The bedroom door was ajar, just an inch, and within the darkness beyond, Claire thought she saw something move. Not a shape, but the suggestion of one, like blackness peeling back from blackness. A darker shadow among shadows. Then came the hum again, louder than ever, rising from the walls, the floor, the very air like a slow intake of breath. Claire took a step back, nearly tripping over the armchair. The note's words rang in her ears. "If you see it, run." And so she did. She turned and fled the apartment barefoot, the flashlight clattering to the floor, her breath ragged in her throat. She didn't stop running until she reached the street, her lungs burning, her legs shaking. Behind her, from somewhere high in the building, she thought she heard a door creak open. Claire didn't return that night. She spent the hours between 2:30 and dawn in an all-night diner 2 neighborhoods away, nursing bad coffee and staring blankly at a crossword puzzle she never touched. The other patrons, an old man with a newspaper, a couple fighting quietly in the corner, barely registered in her mind. Her phone sat on the table, turned face down. She hadn't touched it since the last message. Part of her was afraid to even look, but when the sun finally rose, she flipped it over. No new messages, no missed calls, no alerts. The last thing on the screen remained. "You left the closet open." Claire shivered and turned it off completely. Around 8 a.m., she returned to the building. Her limbs felt rubbery, her thoughts hazy from exhaustion. The street was quiet, the entrance to her apartment building as normal and bland as it had always been. Inside, everything looked exactly the same. To the same. She unlocked her door slowly, expecting to hear the hum again or see some trace of what had happened the night before. But the apartment was still. Unnaturally still. like nothing had moved in years. She stepped inside cautiously, eyes darting. The living room was untouched. Her flashlight still lay on the floor where she dropped it. The coffee table had a smear from where her hand must have slipped. Everything was right where she left it. Everything except the closet door. It was wide open. Inside, the closet was empty. No scratches, no sutkas, no hanger, nothing. It had been cleared out. Claire's hands went cold. Before she could react, there was a knock at the door behind her. Knock, knock, not 3, just 2. Startled, Claire turned and opened it without thinking. A woman stood there, early 50s, dressed in a raincoat, though it wasn't raining. She had tired eyes and thin lips, and she held a paper grocery bag in both arms. Sorry to bother, the woman said, glancing past Claire into the apartment. I used to live here. Claire blinked. You were the last tenant. The woman gave a faint, humorless smile. Before her, she said softly, there have been others. Claire stepped aside. You want to come in? The woman hesitated. Not really, but you need to hear a few things before it gets worse. Claire let her in. The woman sat stiffly on the edge of the couch, her grocery bag still clutched in her lap. Claire noticed the paper inside was rustling slightly, though the woman wasn't moving, almost like it was breathing. My name's Nora, she said at last. I lived in this unit 20 years ago, back when the closet was just a closet. Claire sat across from her, barely breathing. What happened? Nora didn't answer right away. Instead, she ran a fingertip along a faded scratch in the coffee table. My fiancé and I moved in together here. We were happy at first. Then the knocking started. Claire swallowed. Always at 2:13. Nora's eyes lifted slowly. Yes, always that exact time. She reached into her bag and pulled out a bundle of folded papers. Yellowed, brittle, edges curling. She handed them to Claire. They're notes, diaries, from me, from others. I found them hidden under the floorboards after the 3rd month. Claire flipped through the first few pages. Most were frantic, some written in block letters, some smeared with tears or what looked like blood. One passage jumped out. It knocks in 3s to ask for permission. More than that is an invitation it gives itself. Another, beneath it, the voice is not human. If it learns your voice, it can copy it. Claire looked up, her chest tightening. It spoke to me last night. It knew my name. It unlocked the front door. Nora nodded slowly, her hands wringing the edge of her coat. That's when I left. When it started to move beyond the closet. You think it's contained to that one space, but it learns, grows. It mimics people you love. I heard my mother's voice the night I ran. Claire blinked. My mother's been calling. She left voicemails, but when I called back, she said she never called me. Nora's face grew pale. It's starting over. The cycle. The longer you stay, the more it becomes part of your life. And once it's inside, she didn't finish the sentence. Instead, she looked toward the hallway. Claire followed her gaze. The bedroom door was wide open. Neither of them had touched it. From within the room came a single, low knock. Just one, followed by a voice. Claire's own voice, perfectly mimicked. It's okay. You can come see. Nora stood abruptly. Don't follow it. Don't ever follow it. Claire stared at her own bedroom as goose flesh crawled down her back. What does it want? She whispered. Nora's answer came soft, hollow. It wants you to open the door from your side. Claire stood frozen as her own voice echoed from the bedroom. Soft, inviting, unnatural. It's okay. Come see. Nora moved quickly, stepping between Claire and the hallway like a shield. Don't go near it. That isn't you. I know, Claire said quietly, but it sounds exactly like me. That's how it gets in, Nora said. First the voice, then the memories. It'll twist them. You'll think you're dreaming. That's your own thoughts. But it isn't. Claire looked at the stack of papers again. These people, the ones who left the notes, did any of them make it out? Nora didn't answer immediately. She moved to the window, pulling back the curtain just enough to look out. Some left, she said, but they weren't right after. One woman ran to her sister's house, but she started hearing the knocking through the walls. A man who fled in the middle of the night. He was found a week later on the subway, barefoot, repeating the same word over and over. What word? Nora's lips parted, but no sound came out. Then came a crash from a bedroom. Something heavy had fallen. Claire jumped. What was that? Nora didn't move. It's baiting you, testing your fear. If you investigate, it'll retreat, but it'll come back stronger. Closer. Claire took a step toward the hallway anyway, heart racing. She flicked on the flashlight again and aimed it down the narrow corridor. The bedroom door was now completely open, the light within flickering strangely. Claire, Nora said sharply. If you keep giving it your attention, it feeds on that. It's learning you. Claire stopped. The urge to look, to know, was almost unbearable. But Nora's warning weighed heavier. They waited in silence. No more crashes. No more voices. Finally, Claire backed away. Okay, she said. Okay, we need to destroy it. Nora shook her head. You can't. You can't burn it, drown it, trap it. It's not in the closet. The closet's just its mouth. Claire blinked. Then where is it? Nora looked at her, eyes dark and filled with a haunted clarity. It's between the walls. Claire stared at Nora, unsure if she had heard her right. Between the walls? What does that even mean? Nora walked slowly toward the far wall of the living room, the one that bordered the bedroom. She placed her palm flat against it, then knocked 3 times. Each thud echoed dully, deeper than it should have. It's like the apartment has another skin, she said. A hidden layer. I first noticed it after I saw something moving behind the outlets. A flicker of motion. Too fast for vermin. Too big. When I took a screwdriver to the panel, I found space. A hollow gap that shouldn't exist. Claire swallowed hard. And it lives in there. Nora nodded. It moves when you're not looking. The knocking isn't a call. It's a ripple. Something shifting behind the drywall. Claire felt suddenly claustrophobic. Every surface in the apartment began to feel less like a structure and more like a shell, a brittle casing over something alive. But why? She asked. Why here? Why me? I don't think it chooses, Nora said. I think it waits. For someone who'll listen, who'll start responding. Some of us are more open than others. Claire turned toward the hallway again. It knew my name before I ever spoke aloud. Names are powerful things, Nora murmured, especially when whispered through walls. The two stood in silence for a long moment. Claire's breath trembled. Then, without warning, the overhead light flickered and went out. They were plunged into darkness. The flashlight in Claire's hand cast a narrow cone of light, and in that beam, she saw something horrific, a handprint, on the wall, smudged and wide like something had leaned there, but it was too large, too long-fingered. It hadn't been there minutes ago. Claire stepped back, heart thudding, when she heard it, a slow, slithering, dragging sound coming from inside the wall. Nora whispered, "It's moving." Then scrape, 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 behind the drywall, like nails on old wood, circling. And then a voice hissed from within the plaster itself, soft as breath. "You let me in once. I never left." Claire turned to Nora, eyes wide. "What does it want?" Nora shook her head, her voice tight. "It wants to become you." Claire couldn't move. The whisper still lingered in her ears, slithering through her thoughts like smoke. "You let me in once. I never left." She stared at the wall where the voice had come from, the flashlight trembling in her hand. The beam flickered over warped paint, revealing more handprints, several, some overlapping, some stretched too far apart to belong to a human being. "How does it become you?" Claire asked, her voice barely a breath. Nora knelt beside the wall, pressing her ear to it. Her eyes fluttered closed, as if straining to catch the faintest sound. "It listens. It learns your voice, your habits, your fears. It mimics. It replaces." Claire felt nausea build in her gut. "I heard it mimic my mother." Nora nodded, not looking up. "And it'll get better at it. So it won't just speak like her. It'll move like her, sound like her, appear as her, if only out of the corner of your eye. It tests what you'll follow." Suddenly, from the far end of the apartment, the bedroom door slammed shut with a thunderous crack. Claire yelped, dropping the flashlight. It rolled across the floor, spinning its beam wildly until it landed on something small, something that hadn't been there before. A piece of torn cloth. No, not cloth. A scrap of skin-colored material, rubbery, thin. Claire knelt to pick it up, hesitating. It felt soft, too soft, artificial, like latex. She flipped it over. It was a portion of a human face. An eye socket. No eye. Just the empty mold where one would go. Like a discarded mask. She gasped and dropped it. Nora knelt beside her, trembling. That's how it comes through. It wears pieces of us. Casts. It's trying to be someone, anyone. Claire backed away. Why leave it out in the open? It's warning you, Nora said darkly. Or teasing. It likes fear. It feeds on the tension before it strikes. Claire gritted her teeth. I'm not staying here tonight. Nora's eyes locked onto hers. Don't go to a friend's house. Don't stay in a hotel. It follows. Once you hear your name from its mouth, it can pass through thresholds. Then what do I do? Claire whispered. If I can't leave, can't fight it, what's left? Nora stood and walked toward the bedroom door. You contain it. Reinforce the walls. Starve it of attention. You become a house with no doors. Claire didn't follow her. She stared at the latex scrap still curled on the floor. And then, the power flicked back on. The lights glowed a little too brightly. Everything was still. But in the window glass, Claire saw a reflection that didn't match her own. Someone else was standing behind her, smiling. Claire spun around, heart hammering. No one was there, but the reflection had been real, undeniable. A woman with long, stringy hair, sunken eyes, pale skin stretched too tightly over her skull, and that smile too wide, too knowing. Claire backed away from the window. The image burned into her retinas. Nora stood frozen in the hallway, her eyes locked on the bedroom door. It's starting to test your sense of self, she said quietly. It'll make you doubt what's real. What's yours? What's you? I already don't know anymore, Claire whispered. I'm scared I'm losing my mind. Nora stepped closer, her voice lower now. That's how it wins. It wears you down until you can't tell the difference between your thoughts and its whispers. Until you forget who you were before it came. Claire clenched her fists. You said I have to contain it. But how? What does that even look like? Nora glanced back toward the living room. When I left, I sealed the closet shut with salt and prayer. I hammered nails into the frame and drew sigils over the door. I used blood, not mine. Claire's stomach turned. That's not just folklore, Nora added. The apartment listens to intention. It feeds on belief. You give it fear, it grows. But if you give it rules, if you reinforce the threshold, sometimes it backs down. Claire stepped toward the closet, pausing before the half-open door. She reached for it slowly and pulled it closed. It didn't fight her. It swung shut with a whisper, and for a moment, the air seemed to thin, as if the apartment had inhaled. Nora dug in her bag again and pulled out a pouch of salt, a stick of chalk, and an old rusted key. These were left by the tenant before me, she said. Each of us added something. You'll have to do the same if you want a chance. Claire took the pouch. Why the key? It's to the basement, Nora said. Locked and used for years. But that's where the voices are strongest. If you want to know what it really is, that's where you'll find the truth. Claire stared at the rusted key in her hand, and from down the hall, the hum started again. But this time it wasn't low. It was singing, a voice, hers, sweet and melodic. Musical note. I live between the walls. I know your every name. Musical note. Claire's blood turned to ice. Nora whispered, don't listen. It's not just a song. The melody continued, louder now, moving through the rooms. Musical note. Let me wear your face a while, and I'll make you the same. Musical note. Claire clutched the pouch tighter. It was time to go into the basement. Part 15 coming next. Shall I continue? You said, continue. ChatGPT said, here is part 15 of The Last Tenant. Part 15, the key to below. Claire stood at the top of the building's basement stairs, the rusted key heavy in her pocket and the pouch of salt clutched tight in her fist. The door had opened easily, too easily. The hinges hadn't squealed, as if they'd been oiled in anticipation. Nora had stayed upstairs. You shouldn't go alone, she'd said, voice tight with unease. But Claire had insisted. Whatever this thing was, it had made its home inside her life. She couldn't push it away if she didn't know what it truly was. Now she descended into the darkness, each step creaking underfoot, the smell of wet concrete and mold thick in the air. The flashlight's beam trembled as it passed over exposed pipes and spiderwebs. The stairs ended at a heavy metal door, slightly ajar. Claire pushed it open and stepped inside. The basement was vast, much larger than she expected. The walls were unfinished, rough stone and dirt blending into cracked cement. Dozens of rusted pipes crisscrossed the ceiling. Strange markings were scratched into the walls, words and languages she didn't know, and some that looked like twisted versions of her own name. And in the center of the room, a wooden chair bolted to the floor. Claire approached slowly. Something was etched into the concrete beneath the chair. She crouched down, brushing away dust and grit. Letters emerged, jagged, shallow, like they'd been carved by shaking hands. IT wears the skin of memory. Claire swallowed hard. Her flashlight flickered, once, twice, then died completely. Darkness swallowed her. She fumbled with it, hit it against her palm. Nothing. She turned slowly, heart pounding. That's when she heard it. A soft, wet rustling from the far corner. Then, a whisper. Claire's own voice, faint and broken. You don't remember, do you? She backed away from the sound, bumping into the chair. The voice grew louder, closer. You were here before. Claire froze. No, she whispered. I wasn't. But her voice didn't sound certain. The air grew colder. Suddenly, a dim light blinked to life overhead. A single hanging bulb swinging slightly. And beneath it, slumped against the far wall, was a figure. Something or someone curled in the shadows. Pale limbs, a twisted neck, dried blood on the floor beneath it. Claire stepped closer, throat tightening. The figure wore her old hoodie, the one she'd thought she'd lost years ago in another apartment. It was her size, and its face. Its face was her own, mouth sewn shut, eyes sunken and empty. Her breath caught in her throat. That's when the voice came again, not from the figure, but from behind her in a low growl that no longer tried to imitate her. You've already given me your name. Now, give me your body. Claire spun around, pressing her back to the wall. The light above her sputtered. The shadow she cast on the floor stretched impossibly long, farther than the laws of light should allow. Get out of my head, she hissed, reaching into her coat and hurling a handful of salt across the basement floor. The whisper stopped. For a moment, the air went still, heavy. Then something shrieked, not loud, but sharp. A hiss that sounded wet, like steam from a broken pipe, but layered with words. You will be hollowed. Claire turned her eyes back toward the slumped body in her hoodie. It hadn't moved, but now the chair behind her scraped against the floor. It had moved, or something had moved it. She flashed her backup light, an old phone, and aimed it at the carving beneath the chair again. New words had appeared, fresh and glistening as though recently carved. She stayed too long. Her breath fogged in the freezing air. Her ears rang. The figure with her face still hadn't stirred, but something about it looked less dead now. The chest rose. Once barely, a twitch in one finger, then another. Claire backed away, and then its eyes opened, milky white, sightless, but aware. The figure lifted its head. It opened its mouth, tearing the stitches with a wet rip. Claire, it croaked. You forgot. No, she whispered. This isn't real. You're not me. I was, it said. I was the first part it took. The memory, then the voice, then the face. Claire felt like her ribs were cracking inward. How do I stop it? The doppelganger tilted its head. You don't, it said. You leave before it finishes. Claire shook her head. But I can't. It said it already crossed. If it has your name, and your reflection, and now your fear, then it only needs one more thing. What? The mouth twisted into a bleeding smile. Your consent. The basement suddenly filled with a rushing noise, like hundreds of whispers being forced through a tunnel. Claire fell to her knees, clutching her ears. The bulb burst overhead, plunging her into darkness again. Then, a hand grabbed her shoulder. Cold, clammy, too many fingers. It pulled her close, and something whispered into her ear with a perfect, familiar voice. Say yes. Claire screamed. She twisted free, blindly throwing salt and swinging her phone light. Something recoiled, shrieking like rusted metal torn in half. She scrambled for the stairs, heart a thunderclap in her throat. As she reached the door at the top, she dared a final glance behind her. The doppelganger was standing now, watching, smiling, and wearing her voice as it whispered up the steps. "You're already mine." Claire slammed the basement door shut, twisting the key so hard the old metal bit into her palm. She pressed her back to the wood, breath ragged, her whole body vibrating with adrenaline. From the other side of the door, nothing. Silence. Not even footsteps. As if whatever had been down there was waiting. "Claire!" Nora rushed toward her from the hallway, eyes wide. "What happened?" "I saw it," Claire said. "It has a body. Mine. Or some broken version of it. It spoke to me. Told me it only needs my consent." Nora's face went pale. "Then it's almost complete. If it speaks through your voice, moves through your reflection, and twists your memories, the last stage is surrender. Once you allow it in, even by accident, it becomes you, and you become the echo." Claire felt cold down to her marrow. "Why is it still waiting?" "Because you haven't agreed yet. But it'll try everything now." "Guilt, pleading, familiar fafis." Claire nodded slowly. "Then I can't trust anything I see. Or hear. Not even yourself." A heavy thud came from the far end of the apartment, followed by laughter. Claire's laughter. She turned slowly. At the end of the hall, a tall figure was standing just outside her bedroom door. Its posture was awkward, its joints too loose, its head cocked at an unnatural angle. It wore her favorite sweater, her face, her exact smile. "Claire," it called softly. "You dropped something in the basement." Claire's mouth went dry. It lifted its hand. Dangling from its fingers was the small, rusted key. But now the metal looked melted, twisted, malformed. She backed away. "You're not me." The thing didn't blink. "I'm just tired. Let me rest inside." Claire clenched her fists. "You're not getting in." The smile widened. The thing cocked its head even further, like a bird dissecting prey. "You already opened the door. You opened every door." It took a step forward and hit a line of salt on the floor. Hissed, recoiled, burned. Smoke rose from its foot. It snarled and vanished in a blink, leaving behind the warped smell of burnt meat and ash. Claire staggered backward into Nora. "We have to finish this." Nora nodded, pulling a notebook from her coat. "There's one more thing we haven't tried. Something the last tenant recorded before she disappeared." She flipped through the pages. On the last page, written in trembling ink, "To end it, you must trap it in something that was never yours. It cannot wear what you do not own." Claire blinked. "What does that mean?" Nora looked up, eyes wide. "It means we need to find something in this apartment that never belonged to anyone." Claire turned slowly to the closet door. The handle was turning. The closet door creaked open. Not fast, not slow, a deliberate pace, like a stage curtain rising before a final act. Claire gripped Nora's arm as they stared into the dark. Inside, it wasn't just clothes and boxes anymore. The space had deepened. It no longer resembled the shallow closet she had cleaned when she moved in. The back wall was gone, replaced by shadow. The floor extended farther than it should, and the walls, lined with wallpaper that pulsed faintly, as if breathing. Claire whispered, "It's growing." "No," Nora said, her voice hollow. "It's becoming." Claire stepped forward slowly, raising her phone light again. The glow barely touched the edges, and in the center of the space, where her winter boots should have been, lay an object. A mirror, but not one she recognized. Its frame was blackened wood, carved with warped faces and twisted mouths. The glass was so clouded it looked like standing water, until it shimmered slightly, revealing fleeting images that flickered and died. A childhood bedroom, a hospital hallway, a reflection of Claire, asleep, lips slightly parted, filmed from an angle she could never have reached herself. Nora's voice was sharp now. "That's it. That's what it's using." Claire turned. "The mirror?" "Yes. It's the anchor. The first object it used to mimic you. You didn't bring it here. I didn't either. It just appeared." Claire stepped closer. The air around the mirror rippled with heat and cold in equal waves. Her skin prickled. "We could trap it inside," Nora said, handing her the notebook. "There's a binding spell here. Crude. But if you say the words while it's watching you in the mirror, while it thinks you're breaking, you can turn its own mimicry against it. Claire stared into the glass. Something inside the reflection moved. Her reflection was no longer matching her movements. It was smiling, even though her lips were sealed. Then it raised a hand. Its palms split open down the middle. Something inside writhed. Another eye, blinking. Claire choked on a cry, but held steady. She opened the notebook and read aloud. By name unspoken, by face undone, return to void, where light is none. Be bound to glass, be shadows thread. No breath, no skin, no dream, no bed. The mirror cracked, just a line at first, then another. The reflection screamed, not Claire's voice, something deeper. Choked, animalistic. Nora shouted, don't stop. Claire kept going, louder. Unmake the skin, return the lie. What wears my face must never die, but sleep beneath the gaze untrue, and vanish from what once it knew. The mirror shattered, a soundless explosion of light and wind. Then, silence. No scream, no breath, just glass shards on the closet floor, and Claire's own face reflected in every piece. Her true face, pale and shaken, but whole. Nora stepped forward. Did it work? Claire looked around. The humming had stopped. The walls no longer breathed. I think so, she said, her voice raw. I think it's gone. But one shard of the mirror pulsed faintly, and in it, something still blinked. Claire stared at the shard pulsing faintly on the floor. It was no larger than a silver dollar, yet it throbbed like a living organ torn from something far too large to comprehend. She reached down with trembling fingers, but Nora slapped her hand away. Don't touch it, Nora said sharply. It's not finished. Claire looked at her, breath catching. I thought we bound it. We weakened it, Nora said. Trapped most of it. But these things, they scatter like spiders. All it needs is one piece, one sliver of self, and it'll grow again. Given time, Claire stood and backed away from the mirror remains. So how do we stop it for good? Nora looked down, jaw set. You bury it where nothing reflects. No glass, no water, no metal. Deep, far from memory. Claire's eyes drifted to the window. Outside, the sun had begun to rise for the first time in what felt like years. The sky was a dull gray, damp, the kind of dawn that carried no warmth. We should go, she said. They wrapped the shard in layers of cloth, sealed it inside a tin box, and packed it with salt from Nora's pouch. Claire carried it like a cursed organ, her hands sweating despite the cold metal surface. As they walked down the hallway, something strange happened. The apartment changed. The wallpaper no longer peeled. The ceiling no longer wept. The floorboards stopped groaning beneath their steps. The mirror in the hallway returned to showing only what was real. It was as if the place were resetting. Nora noticed too. It's dormant now. For how long? Who knows? Claire turned the lock one final time and stepped into the hallway. Then we make sure it never wakes up. They drove for hours, past the city, past the suburbs, until concrete gave way to fields and forests and the bones of forgotten towns. Eventually, they reached the edge of a burned-down chapel, buried beneath overgrowth. This place has no mirrors, Nora said, hoisting a shovel from the trunk. They dug for hours. Sweat soaked through their clothes. At last, Claire dropped the box into the hole and poured the last of the salt in after it. Dirt covered it quickly, and Nora whispered something under her breath, a prayer or a warning. When they returned to the car, Claire looked back only once. Nothing moved. No wind. No whispers. But deep beneath the ground, in the darkness beneath the soil, the shard blinked. Not in fear, in waiting. Claire's eyes drifted to the window. Outside, the sun had begun to rise for the first time in what felt like years. The sky was a dull gray, damp, the kind of dawn that carried no warmth. We should go, she said. They wrapped the shard in layers of cloth, sealed it inside a tin box, and packed it with salt from Nora's pouch. Claire carried it like a cursed organ, her hands sweating despite the cold metal surface. As they walked down the hallway, something strange happened. The apartment changed. The wallpaper no longer peeled. The ceiling no longer wept. The floorboards stopped groaning beneath their steps. The mirror in the hallway returned to showing only what was real. It was as if the place were resetting. Nora noticed too. It's dormant now. For how long? Who knows? Claire turned the lock one final time and stepped into the hallway. Then we make sure it never wakes up. They drove for hours. Past the city, past the suburbs, until concrete gave way to fields and forests and the bones of forgotten towns. Eventually, they reached the edge of a burned-down chapel, buried beneath overgrowth. "This place has no mirrors," Nora said, hoisting a shovel from the trunk. They dug for hours. Sweat soaked through their clothes. At last, Claire dropped the box into the hole and poured the last of the salt in after it. Dirt covered it quickly, and Nora whispered something under her breath, a prayer or a warning. When they returned to the car, Claire looked back only once. Nothing moved. No wind. No whispers. But deep beneath the ground, in the darkness beneath the soil, the shard blinked. Not in fear, in waiting. Months passed. Claire moved in with Nora. They never returned to the apartment on Durham Street. It was sold quietly, the building's history erased from the records, its tenants scattered and silent. But some things, some tenants never leave. Claire found herself waking some nights to the feeling of being watched. A creak in the hallway, a mirror catching her reflection a beat too late. "I still see it sometimes," she admitted one night, curled on the couch beside Nora. "Not the thing itself, just signs, a twitch in my reflection, a voice that sounds like mine when I'm not speaking." Nora didn't respond at first. Then, quietly, it left scars. "You don't just heal from something that tried to wear you." Claire nodded. "Do you think it's really gone?" "The last piece." Nora hesitated. "I think we slowed it. Buried it deep enough that it won't rise for years. Maybe decades. But gone." She shook her head. "These things don't end. They wait. They find cracks. People too tired to fight. People too lonely to notice." Claire's fingers tightened around the warm mug in her hands. "What if it finds someone else?" "It will," Nora said, "unless someone's there to warn them. That's why I stayed in the apartment after it took my sister. I thought I could stop it, but I couldn't alone." Claire met her gaze. "We stop it together now." A pause. Nora nodded slowly. They began compiling everything. Notes, warnings, symbols, the binding spell, photographs of the basement carvings. Claire started writing it all down. Not as a diary, as a manual, a way to help the next tenant. Because someone, someday, will find themselves staring into a mirror that blinks back. And maybe then, a single page from a battered notebook, tucked beneath a floorboard or hidden in an old closet, will give them just enough warning. At the top of that page, written in Claire's careful handwriting, "If you find this, it already knows your name. It remembers everyone who ever stayed here, but it especially remembers those who left. Don't speak to the reflection. Don't answer the knocking. And whatever you do, don't sign another lease." 3 weeks after the building was condemned, Claire's dreams began again. Not nightmares exactly, but worse. False comfort. Dreams where she was back in her childhood home, the air warm, her mother humming in the kitchen. But in every dream, there was a mirror on the wall that had never been there before. And in the mirror, her mother never had a face. She jolted awake one night, gasping, a scream caught in her throat. Nora was already up, sitting at the kitchen table with her tarot cards scattered across the surface. She hadn't touched them since the night they'd buried the shard. Claire joined her, rubbing her arms. "Another one?" Nora asked, not looking up. Claire nodded. "It's always the same. It knows how to feel safe. That's the worst part." Nora laid a card face up. "The Tower." Claire frowned. "That doesn't feel encouraging. It means change, upheaval, not always destruction, but never comfort." She pulled another card. "The Moon." "I think the shard's still active," Nora said. "The one we buried. The longer we ignore it, the stronger it gets. Something's calling to it. Or maybe it's sending out a call." Claire felt her stomach twist. Like a signal. Nora nodded. Or a lure. To find a new host. Someone weaker. Someone curious. Claire stood up, pacing. "We sealed it. You said that was enough." "I said it was enough for now. But it's not dead. It was never alive. It invades. It borrows shape. And it remembers every room it ever haunted." Claire's voice dropped. "Then where do we start?" Nora pulled out a folded map. We dig. Not literally, not yet. We go back to where it started. The building. I traced its deeds back through 5 owners. None lasted more than a year. And the first owner, she pointed at the edge of the map. A name scrawled in faded pen. Margot Renner. 1939. She vanished, Nora said. Left behind only a diary page. One sentence. Claire leaned in. It followed me from the lake. Claire's heart dropped. So it didn't start in the apartment. Nora's eyes were grim. No, that was just its most recent address. Claire looked out the window. The trees beyond their porch swayed in a wind she couldn't hear. I think it's moving again. The lake was an hour outside the city. Nameless, unlisted on any recent maps, marked only by a gravel road and a rusted gatepost leaning like a gravestone. Nora drove while Claire stared out the window, notebook in her lap, thumb running over the page where the first owner's name was written, Margot Renner. They parked near a chain-link fence, long since overtaken by weeds. Beyond it, the trees thinned into a clearing. The lake itself sat like a dark eye in the earth, glassy, motionless, wide, and utterly silent. No birds, no wind, no ripes. Are we sure this is it? Claire asked, stepping carefully over the roots. Nora unfolded an old newspaper clipping. This is where Margot's summer home stood, burned down in the 40s. No cause ever found. Before that, there were rumors. People said the lake made copies, reflections that didn't match, swimmers who never came back up but still walked into town days later. Claire shivered. Has anyone been out here recently? No. That's why it was perfect for burying the shard. They reached a ridge overlooking the lake. Below, nestled in a patch of soft dirt and brambles, was the spot they'd dug weeks ago. Claire's breath caught. The tin box was open. And empty. No, she whispered. We sealed it. We packed it with salt. How? Look. Nora pointed to the nearby tree. Scratched into the bark with a jagged tool. Possibly fingernails were letters, fresh. It wants to come back. Claire stumbled backward, panic surging in her chest. What if someone found it? She said. A hiker, a camper. What if they opened it and didn't even know what they were looking at? Nora bent down, brushing aside the disturbed earth. Then it has a new host. One it chose. Claire stared at the lake. Its surface began to shimmer, just faintly, like something underneath had stirred. Then she saw her own reflection in the water. But it wasn't doing what she was. It was smiling. Wide, dead-eyed. The water trembled. And Claire's reflection raised its hand. From beneath the surface, Claire stumbled back from the lake's edge, nearly slipping on the wet grass. Her heart thundered. The reflection, her face, hadn't disappeared. It lingered in the trembling water, expression unchanged, lips curled in a grotesque, knowing grin. I saw it, she whispered. It's in the lake. Nora was already unfolding a small pouch from her coat pocket. Salt, dried herbs, a rusted charm. It never left. Claire turned to her. What does that mean? It's still here? After all we did? It means it never really needed the apartment. It just needed us to find it, to carry it farther. She nodded toward the water. Now it's awake again. They backed away from the lake, but the air had shifted. The trees swayed without wind. The light around them dimmed, though no clouds crossed the sun. Claire looked behind them. A second Claire stood at the tree lean. Same coat, same posture, except its head was slightly tilted. The eyes were too wide. The mouth didn't blink when the wind blew across its face. Claire froze. Nora whispered, "Don't look at it too long." The thing didn't move. It simply watched. Then, in perfect unison, it lifted its hand and pointed toward the lake. Claire's voice shook. Is it trying to call me in? No, Nora said, clutching the charm in her fist. It's trying to merge. You broke the mirror. That was just a tool. This lake is the source. A kind of well. You're its reflection now, and it wants to finish the link. Claire backed farther. The thing in the trees began to twitch, head jerking like a puppet in a broken show. Then it stepped forward, 1 foot, then another, with a terrible, skinless grin stretching across its face. Nora grabbed Claire's arm. We have to break the tether. If it completes the link, you'll stop being you. Claire stared at the lake. Then how do we end it? Nora's face was pale. We go in. Claire's stomach dropped. What? Nora's voice hardened. It came from the water. So we drown it where it was born. Claire looked between the approaching copy and the lake's surface, which now rippled, not from wind, but from something beneath. A second chance, or a final mistake. They turned toward the water and stepped in. The lake clutched them like ice. Claire gasped as the cold bit through her skin, every nerve lighting up in alarm. Nora held her hand tight, whispering a chant between breaths. The reflection on the water's surface, Claire's double, remained unbroken as they moved beneath it. It hovered there, watching unmoving, a frozen image in liquid glass. Then Claire's foot struck something hard below, a stone slab, flat and smooth, out of place in a natural lake bed. "What is this?" she gasped. Nora knelt, brushing away silt. A symbol had been etched into the stone, a spiral surrounded by mirrored eyes. "It's a seal," Nora said, voice shaking. "But it's incomplete. Someone tried to trap it decades ago. Maybe Margot, but they failed." Claire ran her fingers over the carving. The spiral seemed to hum beneath her touch, like it was waiting. Then the water darkened, not from above, from below. A shape emerged beneath the stone, blacker than pitch, shifting, no defined edges, like a stain that pulsed with memory. It whispered, "You brought me back." Claire reeled back. The voice was inside her head, oily and cold. "It's awake," she said. "It knows us." Nora gritted her teeth. "Then we bind it. Finish what Margot started." She reached in her coat, pulled a silver needle, and pricked her finger. Blood bloomed in the water. Claire followed suit, her blood swirling beside Nora's in the lake's stillness. They touched the seal together. The spiral flared, once, with pale blue light. And the lake screamed. Water churned violently. Waves slapped against them, though there was no wind. Claire felt something slam into her ribs underwater. Fingers, cold and boneless, trying to pull her down. Then came the voices. Dozens. Hundreds. Whispers clawing through the water, echoing in her bones. "Let us in. You wore us once. Let us wear you again." Claire clutched Nora's hand. "Do it now." Nora shouted a word Claire didn't understand. The seal burned, blinding. The shape below the stone twisted, contorting in agony. Claire saw flashes, faces trapped in black, like screams frozen in pitch. All reflections it had taken, all echoes it had left behind. Then silence. The shape fractured like glass under pressure, and sank. Gone. The water stilled. No more whispers. No more reflections. Just the deep, uneasy silence of a lake holding its breath. Claire and Nora clambered onto the shore, soaked to the bone, lungs heaving. Claire collapsed onto the dirt, staring up at the trembling trees above. The sky seemed brighter, unnaturally so, as if the sun had broken through something far heavier than clouds. Nora sat beside her, eyes fixed on the water. "Did we do it?" Claire asked. Her voice sounded thin, distant. Nora didn't respond immediately. Then, "I think we unhooked it. Cut the anchor it used to cling to this place." Claire sat up. "But it's not dead, is it?" "No," Nora said softly. "It never dies. It just breaks. Fractures. Every piece goes somewhere. The shard we buried, that was one. This lake? Probably another. We severed its link to you, to me, to the apartment. But it's still out there." Claire stared at the water, and then noticed the mirror, half buried in the mud, beside the tree with the scratched warning. It hadn't been there when they arrived. She crawled toward it, slowly. Her own face stared back at her, normal, exhausted, afraid. But this time, something was different. The reflection blinked, just once, out of rhythm. Claire screamed and hurled the mirror into the lake. It sank without a sound. Nora pulled her back. "It's residual. Remnants. Don't look at them too long, or they'll see you back." Claire wiped her eyes. "This thing, it doesn't stop, does it? It waits for cracks. Weak moments. People too tired or too broken to notice their reflection is wrong." Nora nodded grimly. "But now we know, and now we can prepare." She reached into her coat again and handed Claire a small notebook. It was leather-bound, aged, and filled with ink that looked recently scribbled. "What is this?" Margot's notes, Nora said. I found them in an archive months ago. I didn't understand them then. But now, she tapped the cover. There's more. More sites. More pieces. She was tracking them. She believed there were 7. Claire blinked. 7 shards. 7 sources, Nora corrected. 7 wounds were the barrier between here and it grew thin. The apartment was just one. Claire opened the notebook, fingers trembling. A new page had been added, in handwriting that wasn't either of theirs. Just one line. I know where you sleep now. Back at Claire's apartment. Her new apartment, far from Durham Street. Nora slept on the couch while Claire sat at the kitchen table, the journal open before her. She hadn't written the line. She'd checked. Ink tests. Pressure marks on the page. The sentence, I know where you sleep now, had appeared between 1 hour and the next. The handwriting was narrow, sharp, unlike anything she or Nora had used. Claire tapped the page with a penlight. No new entries appeared, until she whispered, without meaning to, What do you want? At first, silence. Then the ink bled across the page. Another sentence formed slowly, letter by trembling letter. Reflection is memory. Memory is entrance. Claire recoiled. No, she muttered. We severed the link. We burned it out. She slammed the journal shut. Across the room, Nora stirred. Something wrong. Claire hesitated. The book, it's writing back. Nora rose groggily, rubbing her eyes. That's not possible. It's paper. Ink. It's just. She stopped as Claire handed the journal to her. Nora's eyes scanned the new message. Her expression darkened. We didn't cleanse it, she muttered. We woke it, then cut one of its limbs. Now the rest know we're aware. It's trying to reattach itself. Claire shook her head. To me, not just you. To anyone who knows. It doesn't like being seen. They stared at the journal for a long moment. Then Nora said, We need to finish what Margot started. Claire frowned. You said she disappeared. Maybe she failed. Or maybe she succeeded in going where this thing lives. Claire's eyes narrowed. You want to follow her? Nora opened the journal again and pointed to a crudely drawn map, one Claire hadn't seen before. It hadn't been there yesterday. A cluster of trees, a black pond, a cellar marked with a spiral. Beneath the map, one more line. The second mouth opens. Claire looked at Nora. Where is that? Nora's voice was hoarse. Vermont, near the forest line. Locals call a hollow orchard. Claire nodded slowly, heart thudding. Then we go. The road to Hollow Orchard felt older than time, unpaved, riddled with frost-heaved cracks, and lined with trees that leaned too far inward, as if whispering secrets above the car. Claire and Nora arrived near dusk. A blanket of fog hovered low, curling around the roadside like fingers brushing a pulse. There were no welcome signs, no homes, just the lingering sense of being watched. They parked beside an overgrown trailhead, the map from Margot's journal clutched in Claire's hand. Nora adjusted her pack. This place was abandoned decades ago. People said it was cursed, sickness, vanishing children, voices in the trees. Claire looked up. The branches above swayed in a rhythm that didn't match the breeze. What's the second mouth? She asked. Nora's mouth tightened. If the lake was the first, a wound, it follows that another spot must serve as the second. Somewhere the reflection can speak out. Claire didn't like the sound of that. They followed the trail deep into the woods, flashlights cutting through the mist. After half an hour, the path widened into a clearing. Stone walls, collapsed foundations, the bones of a forgotten village. And at its center, a narrow, boarded-up entrance embedded in a hill. The cellar. The wood over the doorway was scorched black. Strange symbols had been carved around the frame. Crude spirals, mirrored eyes, teeth. Claire stepped forward, then stopped, because she could hear breathing. Not Nora, not her own, from beneath the cellar door. Heavy, wet, animal-like, but close just below the surface. Nora crouched beside the boards. Help me pry it open. Claire hesitated. Should we? If it's truly another mouth, we have to seal it, before someone else hears the voice. They worked together in silence, the boards groaning, splitting. One by one, they came loose, revealing the darkness below. A staircase descended into earth. Knuckle waves. No dust. Just waiting. Claire shone her light down. The walls were stone, engraved again and again with the spiral mark. And then she saw it. A figure standing at the bottom of the steps, motionless. Margot Renner, or what was left of her. Claire froze, the flashlight beam trembling in her grip. The figure at the bottom of the cellar steps didn't move. It was unmistakably human, but wrong. Margot's body stood perfectly still, feet bare on cold stone, her face lifted toward them. Her skin was pale, stretched too tightly over her bones, and her eyes, those eyes, were entirely black, not like ink, but like absence. No cine, no life, just void. Is that her? Claire whispered. Nora stepped cautiously forward, voice low. It looks like her, but that thing, it hasn't breathed once. Claire's flashlight flickered, and Margot moved. A single step, noiseless. Her head twitched once, then again, like a puppet finding its strings. Nora hissed. Back away. Slowly, but Claire couldn't move. She could hear something now. Not words, but thoughts, slipping into her skull like smoke. You see with borrowed eyes. You speak with broken mouths. Do you think you're the first to try? The voice wasn't Margot's. It was many, layered and dissonant, like voices reflecting off each other. Margot, the thing using her, climbed a step, then another, each movement fluid, too smooth. Her mouth opened wide, wider, until the jaw cracked with a sickening pop. From within her mouth, something shifted. A second tongue, a writhing shadow, something that didn't belong in flesh. Claire screamed and stumbled back, nearly falling into Nora, who dragged her away. Nora fumbled with a small cloth bundle from her coat and lit it, a charm, smoldering with pungent herbs. She hurled it toward the stairs. As it landed, Margot shrieked, not with her own voice, but dozens layered atop one another, all screaming the same fragmented phrase. Don't close the second mouth. We haven't finished speaking. Smoke filled the cellar. The air twisted with heat and pressure. The walls shuddered, and a high-pitched keening echoed up the stairwell as the charm flared. Claire caught one last glimpse of Margot's face. It was melting, like wax over flame. Her features slid from her skull, revealing a mirror underneath, cracked and flickering. The thing within her was made of reflection. Nora slammed the cellar door shut and nailed it closed again with trembling hands. Neither of them spoke for a long time. Only the woods did, quiet and waiting. They didn't sleep that night. The remains of hollow orchards stretched out around them, rotting homes, foundations swallowed by vines, and the ever-present sound of distant footsteps in the trees. Never close, never far. Claire stared at the boarded cellar door as if it might breathe again. What was it doing with Margot's body? She asked quietly. Nora sat cross-legged by the fire they'd built, flipping through Margot's journal. Possession's not quite right. More like replication. I think it reflects its victims until it becomes them. Claire shuddered. Then she's gone. Nora didn't answer. Eventually, Claire stood and wandered the ruins of the orchard. Beneath her boots, leaves crunched, but not just old foliage. Shards of glass glinted in the dirt. Tiny mirrors, dozens, some as small as coins, some shaped like teeth. She crouched and lifted one. Her reflection didn't blink, but it smiled. Claire dropped it immediately. The smile remained frozen in the shard, as if captured at the moment of contact. She called back to Nora. There's more out here, pieces of it, everywhere. Nora was already moving, pulling chalk from her coat to draw sigils around the fire. Then this place was never abandoned. It was buried, suppressed. Claire knelt by another ruin, a crumbling house with a stone chimney. Inside, black moss covered the walls, and along the hearth was a name carved in childlike scrawl. Ellie. Below it, a spiral drawn in what looked like rusted red. Then Claire saw it, a mirror nailed to the ceiling. An old, handheld vanity, cracked, dangling by twine. And in it, a child's face. Watching her, mouth stitched shut, Claire gasped and backed away, but the image followed. No matter where she moved in the room, the girl's face remained in the reflection, as if the mirror showed only her, no matter the angle. Then came the scratching, soft at first, then louder. Claire looked up. The mirror was scratching itself. Thin cracks formed letters. Makemewhole. Claire turned and ran. When she reached Nora, she could barely speak. There's a child. In a mirror. It has to be whole. Nora's face went pale. Then we were right. About what? Nora looked out over the orchard, her voice low. It doesn't just feed on reflection. It collects them. The orchard slept beneath a dull gray sky. The fire had long since burned down to embers, and now only silence lingered, taut and alert. Claire couldn't shake the image of the little girl in the mirror, her stitched mouth unmoving but her eyes pleading. Collected? Claire echoed. You think it's keeping them? Nora nodded. Memories, identities, people. They don't just vanish, they're absorbed, reflected and copied. It doesn't kill them. It reuses them. Claire stared into the embers. Like Margot. Exactly. And that child, Ellie, was one of the first. She opened Margot's journal to a crumbling page marked only by a dark thumbprint. Scribbled in haste, it read, They're not ghosts. They are echoes without doors. Doors? Claire asked. Mirrors, Nora said. Glass. Water. Anything with a reflection. Each one is a portal it can use to trap what it can't fully consume. If it can't fully take you, it stores your image. Waits for a moment of weakness. Like a spider. Like a museum. Claire shuddered. Then what happens to the real person? Lost, Nora whispered. We're locked inside. Like the girl. Claire stood, pacing. There has to be a way to free her. There has to be a way to fight this. Nora didn't answer immediately. She pulled a folded piece of parchment from her coat. A spell circle, hand-drawn and smudged. There is. Margot called it the unraveling. A ritual meant to shatter the reflection. Not the person, but the trap. Claire looked at her sharply. And it works? She never finished it, Nora admitted. But maybe we can. She pointed toward the house with the mirror in the ceiling. We'll start there. As they approached, the air thickened. Claire felt it pressing against her skin like water. Inside, the temperature dropped. The mirror still hung from the ceiling, unmoving. But the child was gone. Claire's stomach turned. Nora stepped beneath the mirror and opened a vial of salt, pouring it in a circle around herself. Get ready, she said. Once I start, it'll know we're here. All of it. Claire nodded. Then Nora began to chant. The mirror shuddered. Cracks spiderwebbed across the glass. And from within, a scream erupted. Not through air, but through Claire's mind. A howling cry of a child who had forgotten her own name. And behind that scream, something woke up. Something that had been watching the whole time. The air snapped like a cable under tension. Claire's ears rang as Nora's voice grew louder, chanting faster. Symbols burned into the wooden floor beneath the hanging mirror, glowing pale white, then blue, then a sickly green. The mirror trembled. Claire backed away as the glass twisted inward, bending impossibly, like it was inhaling. The child's scream grew warped, deeper, split into multiple pitches. And then, from the center of the mirror's cracking face, Ellie emerged, but only partially. Her small hand, gray and blurred, reached through first, trembling as if pushing through thick jelly. Her stitched mouth was gone, replaced with a look of terror. She was trying to climb out. Keep going, Claire shouted. Nora was drenched in sweat, voice straining. The sigils pulsed violently now, humming with power. A wind rushed inward, dragging dust, ash, and debris toward the center like a vortex. Ellie's face came through. Her eyes locked onto Claire's. Help me, she mouthed. Claire moved without thinking. She crossed the circle, reached out, grabbed Ellie's cold, weightless arm. And suddenly, something else grabbed her. Another hand, larger, rotten fingers wrapped in skin that reflected no light. It shot out of the mirror and clutched Claire's wrist. Its grip was impossibly strong. Claire screamed as the mirror flashed. Images pouring through her mind like acid. Thousands of faces, all trapped, screaming soundlessly from behind silver walls. Ellie, she yelled. Push, come on. The child sobbed and clung tighter. Claire yanked. The creature pulled harder. Then, crack. The mirror split in two, falling from the ceiling in a rain of shards. Ellie collapsed into Claire's arms, her skin ice-cold but solid, whole. The hand that had gripped Claire retracted as the last sliver of mirror shattered on the floor with a hiss, like steam escaping from a buried vent. Everything went still. Ellie blinked. She was real, breathing, alive. Claire hugged her close, unable to stop the tears. Nora dropped to her knees, coughing, her voice hoarse. We did it. One soul freed. But even as they caught their breath, Claire looked down at her own arm. The place where the creature had touched her, it was turning gray, like glass, like reflection. Claire stared at the creeping discoloration on her wrist. It shimmered faintly beneath her skin, like a bruise made of mercury. The veins around it pulsed with unnatural cold, spiderwebbing outward with each heartbeat. Ellie, still in her arms, whispered, "It marked you, like it marked me." Claire blinked. "You remember?" Ellie nodded slowly. "It waits inside. When you see it, it sees you." Her small fingers trembled. "I was asleep for a long time, trapped in silver, but I could still hear. It told me I was the first." Nora helped steady Claire. "We have to sever the mark. Now, before it spreads to your mind." Claire didn't argue. The numbness was already climbing toward her elbow. Her reflection in a cracked window beside them showed her face unchanged, but in the glass, her eyes glinted too brightly. Nora pulled an iron shard from her satchel, one of the mirror pieces, and scorched it in the fire until it glowed red. "Hold still." Claire gritted her teeth as Nora pressed the hot metal to her wrist. A horrible hiss filled the room, not just from the burn, but from something else, something deeper. The mirrored sickness recoiled, the veins writhing beneath the skin as if alive. Claire screamed, but Ellie placed her small hand on Claire's cheek, murmuring, "It hurts because it knows you're not afraid." The mark blistered and bled dark, oily liquid. Then it stopped moving. Nora wrapped the wound tight with salt-soaked gauze. "It's not gone," she warned, "but it's contained. For now." Claire leaned back, breathing hard. "How long before it tries again?" Nora didn't answer. Instead, she glanced toward the orchard trees. "We need to finish the ritual." That wasn't the only mirror. Claire looked up. From the treetops, the orchard seemed different. Branches hung lower, bark warped with glimmering film. The trees themselves were starting to reflect. Not normally. Wrong. Like each trunk was a pane of warped glass, each leaf a curved sliver of silver. The world was becoming a copy. Ellie clutched Claire's arm. "The orchard is the third mouth. If it opens, it won't just reflect. It'll swallow." Claire stood, wincing. "Then we seal it. We seal them all." Nora nodded and opened the last page of the journal. The final entry had appeared. Not Margot's handwriting. Something else. Sharp. Elongated. It read, "3 mouths, 1 eye, and no soul. When all mirrors face inward, the gate will open." Claire looked at Nora. "We're running out of time." The orchard groaned. It was a low, pulsing sound like a heartbeat deep in the earth. Fog slithered between the trees, and now the silver sheen on the bark was impossible to ignore. Every trunk, every limb mirrored fragments of the sky, the ground, and the watchers. But not just reflections. Claire noticed something horrifying. Some mirrored surfaces showed things that weren't there. A figure standing just behind her, another version of Ellie wandering between the trees, a pale, wide-mouthed Claire walking with her arms stiff at her sides. She looked away. Nora had drawn a circle of salt and bone on the ground at the orchard center. Symbols for Margot's final page had been etched carefully in chalk and wax. But the page itself had started to bleed ink, the words warping even as they read them aloud. "We have to anchor the mouths," Nora said, laying out 3 small obsidian stones. "One for the lake, one for the cellar, and one here." Claire took a deep breath. "What happens if we don't finish? Then we become part of it." Reflections without skin. Ellie stood near the edge of the orchard, humming to herself, a quiet lullaby with no tune, no rhythm. Claire moved toward her. "Ellie, are you okay?" The girl looked up, her eyes shining silver. "I remember the eye now," she whispered. "It's not in the orchard. The orchard is the eye." Claire froze. "What?" Nora had overheard. The symbol, three mouths, one eye, it's the fourth piece. The eye isn't a place. It's a state, a turning inward, a final reflection. And then the tree screamed. Not the wind, the trees themselves. A high, warbling wail erupted as bark split and cracked. From deep within the trunks, faces began to press outward. Dozens, hundreds, their features rippling beneath the surface like drowning victims trapped under ice. Ellie clutched Claire's hand, terrified. They're waking up. Nora shouted over the din. The gate, it's trying to open. The air snapped again, like glass cracking across the sky. And one of the mirrors in the tree bark shattered. From the broken reflection stepped Claire. But not her. Not entirely. This version of Claire had no pupils. Her mouth opened, and inside was a spiral of teeth and glass. She stepped into the orchard, barefoot, and tilted her head in perfect synchronization with Claire. Then she whispered, "You don't know which of us is real anymore, do you?" Claire's breath caught. The creature standing before her wore her skin perfectly. It moved like her, even breathed like her. But its eyes, smooth, silvery voids, reflected nothing. No light, no soul. Ellie whimpered and backed away. Nora gripped the talisman at her neck and hissed, "Stay behind me." The false Claire stepped forward. Her bare feet didn't disturb a single leaf. "You pulled one soul out," she said, voice layered with echoes. "You thought that meant you won." Claire stared. "What are you?" The doppelganger smiled. "I'm what's left when the mirror eats everything else." Suddenly, she moved fast, a blur of limbs and sound, lurching toward Claire with impossible speed. Claire ducked instinctively, the clone's hand missing her by inches and splintering a tree behind her. It wasn't flesh that struck, it was glass, a shard of her own reflection, honed to a blade. Nora barked an incantation. A ring of fire erupted around them, halting the creature's next lunge. It hissed and recoiled, pacing just beyond the barrier. "You can't stop all of us," it said. "We've been collecting for generations." Claire stepped closer to the fire's edge, fury burning in her chest. "Why? What do you want?" The creature blinked slowly, mimicking emotion it couldn't feel. To be seen, to be known, to be whole. It glanced at Ellie. She was the first, but not the last. Even now, every mirror in the world trembles. Every child's reflection, every hallway light, every idle glance. We wait, we watch, and when you forget to blink, it stepped backward into a tree trunk and melted into the bark, rippling the surface like water. Gone. Claire trembled. What happens when the orchard opens completely? Nora's face was grim. Then every reflection becomes a door. There won't be a difference between inside and outside. Every thought, every image, copied and twisted. And the world will be eaten from the inside out. Ellie pulled Claire's sleeve. The orchard's heart is still hidden. That's where the eye sees from. That's where you have to go. Claire nodded, jaw tight. Then show us the way. They left the broken circle of trees, moving deeper into hollow orchard's oldest grove, where the fog thickened and time thinned. Behind them, in every reflective surface, more faces began to gather, and all of them wore hers. They walked in silence for what felt like hours. The trees around them grew closer, taller, and older, so old that their bark peeled in long, translucent strips, revealing mirror flesh underneath. Each tree seemed to breathe slightly, as though holding air inside its warped reflection. Nora murmured, "This isn't an orchard anymore. It's a cathedral." Claire didn't respond. Her eyes were fixed ahead, watching Ellie, who led them confidently, as if she'd walked this path in dreams. And perhaps she had. After all, she was the first. The fog cleared slightly as they entered a circular clearing. In the center stood a single, monstrous tree, twisted, gnarled, and impossibly tall. Its bark wasn't bark at all. It was glass, woven with black veins, pulsing softly beneath the surface. Its trunk contained reflections that moved out of sync with reality, delayed, warped, or completely raw. One showed Claire as a child, reaching toward the tree. Another showed Nora bleeding from the eyes. One reflection, flickering like a damaged video, showed nothing at all. The heart, Ellie whispered. Claire took a cautious step forward. This is where it began. No, Ellie said softly. This is where it was born. Suddenly, a low tone rang through the air, like the hum of a tuning fork struck against bone. The sound vibrated inside their skulls. The ground trembled slightly. Nora stepped beside Claire. This is it, the final mouth. If we close it, if we seal this mirror, maybe we trap it for good. Claire hesitated. And if we fail? Nora looked her straight in the eyes. Then it's not just us. Every mirror in every home, every lake, every phone screen, every one becomes a gate. Claire pulled the last obsidian stone from her coat and held it tight. It was warm now, almost burning. The tree's reflections began to change. Faster now, cycling through endless versions of them. Claire dead, Nora vanished. Ellie aging backward into nothing. The glass showed versions of the world where the sky was red and every face wore the same smile. Ready? Nora asked. Claire nodded. Together, they stepped into the clearing, and the tree opened its eyes. Right in the center of the trunk, a vertical slit cracked wide, revealing not wood or bark, but a single massive pupil, glassy and depthless, with no iris, just a reflective void. Claire dropped the stone into the carved sigil at her feet, and all around them, the mirrors screamed. The world bent. Claire felt it not in her bones, but in her memory, as if her very past twisted sideways. Time buckled. For a moment, she was a child again, staring into her bathroom mirror at something just out of frame. Then she was old, alone, watching her own reflection fail to mimic her movements. Then she was now again, kneeling in front of the heart tree as it opened its pupil wider. The scream wasn't made of sound. It came from inside her head, her lungs, her blood. Every surface shimmered violently. Nora fell to one knee, clutching her ears, though no noise came. Ellie stood still, eyes locked with the trees. She didn't cry. She didn't blink. She just stared, completely silent. Claire shouted over the pressure. Now, start the sealing. Nora began chanting, the final ritual Margot had written, part spell, part prayer, part memory. She spoke names of those lost, those trapped, those who had vanished in a silver light. With every name, the sigils on the ground pulsed brighter. Claire slammed her obsidian shard into the center. The tree shuddered. Its eye focused sharply on Claire. And then it mirrored her. Dozens of versions of herself bloomed across the bark, each one screaming silently, their mouths open too wide, jaws unhinged. Claire turned her back on them. I'm not a reflection, she said. I'm me. The mirror beneath her feet cracked. Nora's voice reached a crescendo. Ellie lifted her hand and pointed at the eye. Close it. Claire gritted her teeth, raised the second obsidian shard, and stabbed it into the sigil. The earth shook violently. The eye snapped shut. All at once, the reflections on the tree bark twisted into ash, black veins cracking and peeling away. The faces screamed, but now they couldn't be heard, only seen melting into dust one by one. The wind roared, drawing into the sealed sigil like a vacuum. Claire pulled Ellie into her arms as Nora slammed the final obsidian piece down. And with a deafening final shatter, the mirror heart broke. The tree imploded, its glass limbs spiraling inward, folding in on themselves until all that remained was a crater, dark, cracked earth, and a silence so thick it pressed against their chests. Nothing reflected anymore. Not the trees, not the ground, not even the sky. Claire looked around. No faces, no copies, just them, breathing, alive. The silence was deafening, but not oppressive. For the first time since stepping foot in a hollow orchard, Claire felt the weight lift, not just from air, but from within herself. That tightness in her chest, the flicker in the edge of her vision, the lingering sense of being watched. It was gone. The reflections were gone. Nora sat on the ground, arms limp at her sides, her chest heaving. The fire in her eyes dimmed, but not extinguished. It's sealed, she said softly. Not destroyed. Never destroyed. Just locked away. For now. Ellie stood near the crater, her pale hair glowing faintly in the returning morning light. She touched the edge of the broken earth and whispered something that Claire couldn't hear. Then she turned. "It's quieter now," she said. Claire approached her. "You okay?" Ellie nodded. "The mirror was always with me. I didn't know how loud it had gotten until it stopped." Claire crouched to her level. "Do you remember everything?" Ellie looked up at her with strange clarity. "I remember before. The real before. Before the house. Before the orchard." She looked at the trees. "This place called to us. Not just me. It wanted to be seen. It wanted to make more." Claire's stomach turned. "What was it? Where did it come from?" Nora answered from behind, voice raspy. "Maybe it was always here. A parasite waiting for eyes. Waiting for mirrors." Claire stared at the shattered pit. "Is it really over?" Nora stood slowly, brushing ash from her coat. "As much as it can be, but left echoes, residue. That kind of hunger doesn't die. It just goes quiet." Claire turned to Ellie. "What happens now? You're free. We could find your family. If the air..." Ellie shook her head. "My family's gone, but you're here." Claire felt her throat tighten. "You want to stay with me?" Ellie took her hand, squeezing it. "You pull me back. I don't want to disappear again." A soft breeze moved through the orchard. Real wind, not the groaning breath of something hidden. Light trickled between the trees now, gentle, golden. The leaves were just leaves. Bark was bark. No faces, no glass. They began the walk back to the house. Every step away from the pit felt easier, like the earth itself was letting them go. And behind them, in the soil where the tree once stood, a small sprout pushed its way toward the light. It shimmered, just faintly, like something still watched from beneath. The house looked different in the morning. It wasn't just the way sunlight now touched its frame without bending oddly or vanishing into shadows. It was the stillness. No whispering wallpaper. No flickering lights. No warped angles. Just a tired, creaking home at the end of a long night. Claire stepped inside with Ellie beside her. The air smelled of dust and wood. Of reality. Nora followed, keeping her gaze sharp. "We shouldn't stay long. The orchard's been silenced, but the house, it was its mouth too." Claire nodded, moving to the living room. The broken mirror above the fireplace had been covered with a sheet weeks ago. She pulled it down. The glass was shattered, its surface webbed with cracks. And yet, Claire's reflection was hers. No delay, no echo, no mimicry. Just a woman who'd survived. Ellie touched her own reflection gently. "It feels far away now." Nora moved toward the fireplace, opening a compartment in the floorboards. She retrieved the final pages of Margot's journal, the ones that hadn't yet been translated. "Whatever she knew, she buried in here," Nora said. "She gave us the map to survive. I'll spend the rest of my life making sure no one finds another like it." Claire looked at the pages. She wasn't trying to summon something. She was trying to warn people. Like us. Nora nodded. From upstairs came a faint creak. Claire froze. That came from the study. They exchanged glances. Nora pulled her rusted dagger, an iron blade etched with mirror-breaking runes, and started up the stairs. Claire followed, her heart thudding despite the calm in the air. Ellie stayed at the bottom. "It's okay. I don't think it's angry anymore." Claire looked back. "You sure?" Ellie shrugged. "It's not a voice now, just an echo." The study door was cracked open. Claire pushed it wider. The room was untouched, dust hanging like snowfall in the slanting light. The mirror above the desk was gone, shattered weeks ago. But on the desk sat something new. A single Polaroid. Claire picked it up carefully. It was a photo of her, Nora, and Ellie standing at the orchard edge. The light was strange. Twilight, not dawn, and their faces were partially obscured by shadow. Ellie's face was turned away. Claire flipped the photo. On the back, written in looping black ink, "The orchard remembers, even in rootless soil." Her blood chilled. She looked at Nora, who had gone pale. "We burned the heart," Claire said. "We sealed the mouths. How can it still remember?" Nora stared at the Polaroid for a long time. Then she whispered, "Because something always looks back." The air in the study changed. Not violently, not suddenly, but subtly, like a breath drawn in by a mouth too large to be seen. Claire set the photo down slowly, and it trembled on the desk. as though a small tremor had passed through the wood. "I don't like this," Nora said. "We should have salted this room, too." Claire knelt and ran her fingers along the floorboards near where the mirror once hung. A narrow gap had opened, a seam she knew hadn't been there before. Beneath it, something faintly glittered. Without speaking, she pried the board loose. Beneath it lay a book. Not Margot's. This one was bound in thick, blackened leather that looked like it had been burned or buried. Its pages were warped with moisture. A symbol was embossed on the cover. 3 circles overlapping like mouths stacked vertically. The eye was gone. Claire opened it. Inside were names. Thousands of them. Whole pages filled with cramped, neat handwriting listing name after name after name. Claire flipped further. Some of the names were crossed out. Others were smudged, as if they'd been erased. At the very back was a new entry. Claire Ainsley resisted, sealed. Watch. Claire's hands trembled. Below it, Eleanor, Ellie, returned. Monitor closely. And at the bottom, Nora Vale, incomplete detachment. Risk level. Moderate. Nora looked over her shoulder, her face pale. "What is this?" "I think it's a ledger." Claire swallowed. "Not just the orchards. Something older. This thing, it's keeping track." Ellie appeared in the doorway, quiet as always. "It's still looking." Claire closed the book with a snap. "Then we don't leave it here." She wrapped the book in cloth, stuffed it deep in her pack. Nora didn't argue. The study groaned softly. Ellie backed away. "It doesn't like that." Claire turned toward her. "Then we burn the whole house." "The orchard's closed, but the house is the scar." Nora nodded grimly. "And scars can reopen." They left the study in silence. Claire struck the first match in the kitchen, feeding the fire with old newspaper, oil, and broken chair legs. Nora salted the windows, muttering incantations under her breath. Ellie stood in the front yard, watching the orchard sway faintly in the breeze. When the flames reached the second floor, Claire didn't look back. Not even when the mirrors started to scream from within the walls. The house burned like it had been waiting to. Flames licked through the second floor windows first, hungry and bright, casting long shadows across the dying grass. The porch groaned, splintered, and then collapsed inward. Smoke poured out in thick, oily ropes that rose straight up. No wind touched them. Claire, Nora, and Ellie stood at a distance. None of them spoke. From inside the inferno came echoes. Not screams exactly, but memories of screams, as if the walls were finally giving up their last haunted breaths. The floorboards cracked in protest. One final burst of heat pushed out through the shattered windows, and then the fire settled into a low roar. Nora watched with red-rimmed eyes. "I saw something," she whispered. Claire turned to her. "In the fire?" "In the mirror. Upstairs. Right before we lit it." Nora's voice was low and slow. "It was us, but older. Tired. Like we'd been running for years." Claire didn't respond, because she had seen it too. In the final flicker of the upstairs hall, a shape had appeared in the smoke. A reflection of herself, decades older, hair gray, eyes hollow, watching the house burn with the same heavy resolve. Ellie shifted beside them. "We didn't kill it," she said, almost apologetically. "No," Claire agreed. "We survived it." They watched as the last of the roof caved in. Nora dropped a final pinch of salt at her feet. "The ledger you found, it means we're still on its page. We might always be." Claire placed a hand on her pack where the wrapped book rested. It throbbed faintly like a heartbeat. "Then we don't stop watching." Ellie tilted her head. "And if it tries to come back?" Claire looked at her and smiled, faintly. "Then we make sure we're the ones holding the match." The fire burned into the night. They stayed until only embers remained. No reflections, no whispers, just the soft crackle of wood collapsing into itself. They left Hollow Orchard behind them, but the world had changed, because now they knew how to look. Weeks passed. They moved often, Claire, Nora, and Ellie, never settling in one place long enough to feel the ground harden beneath their feet. Cities blur by, motels and safe houses, always watching for a reflection that lingered too long, a surface too smooth, a shadow that smiled. Claire sat in a train car now, watching countryside rush past through the smudged window. Ellie was curled beside her, headphones in, sketching with a cheap pencil on the back of a napkin. Nora was in the next car, pacing, always alert. Claire allowed herself a moment to exhale. Then something caught her eye, in the glass of the train window. Not the landscape or her reflection, but a door. A black door standing alone in a gray field. No fram, no hinges, just the door, unmoving, floating behind the speeding view. She blinked. It was gone, but her reflection, it didn't blink with her. Claire stood quickly, heart spiking. She turned toward Ellie, who had stopped drawing. "Did you see it?" Claire asked. Ellie nodded slowly. "The black door. It's been following us." Claire swallowed. "Since when?" "Since Hollow Orchard burnt. It watches from further away now, but it's still there." In the next car, Nora slid open the dividing door, her face pale. "You saw it too?" Claire nodded. "I think it's hunting for mirrors again," Nora said. "But not the way it used to. Not glass. Not reflection." "What then?" "People." Nora's voice was quiet. "Those who've seen, who've touched the other side." Claire gripped the strap of her pack tightly. The ledger was still inside. Heavier now. Sometimes it rustled on its own, like pages turning unseen. "We need to get off this train," she said. "Now." Nora nodded. Ellie stood silently. As they gathered their things, the lights flickered once. Just once. And every window in the car briefly reflected the same thing. Claire, Ellie, and Nora, standing still, faces blank, eyes black as obsidian. Then the reflection was gone, and the train kept moving. They disembarked at the next station, an old, nearly abandoned terminal with stained tiles and flickering fluorescents. Rain pattered against the high windows, distorting the light into twitching ribbons across the floor. Claire kept her hand on Ellie's shoulder as they walked. Nora scanned every surface, ticket booths, vending machines, polished steel columns. Any reflection could be a threat now, but most of them showed nothing. No reflections at all, not even their own. "What is this place?" Ellie whispered. Nora crouched and touched the puddle pooling beneath a cracked window. "The train brought us through a fold." Claire turned sharply. "A what?" Nora straightened. "A soft place, between the here and the beneath." The orchard was one, but this... She looked around at the two silent terminal. "This place is closer to the edge." There was movement at the far end of the hall. A tall man in a black coat stood just outside the automatic doors. He wasn't facing them. He stared at his own reflection in the glass, or tried to. Because the window reflected nothing, Claire stepped forward. "Sir." The man turned, and Claire's voice caught her throat. He had no face, no eyes, no mouth, just a smooth stretch of pale skin like paper stretched over bone. Yet somehow she knew he was looking at her. Nora hissed, pulling a small pouch from her coat. "Don't speak to it." The figure tilted its head. The glass beside it began to ripple, like water disturbed by a dropped stone. Ellie stepped back instinctively. Then, for a moment, the reflection returned. But it wasn't Claire or Ellie or Nora in the glass. It was him, the faceless man, his body breaking into pieces, eyes splitting from his palms, a mouth opening across his chest, wide and whispering. "You brought the ledger." Claire's skin went cold. The mouth in the reflection didn't move. The sound came from inside her head. "You think fire can close what never lived?" The lights above them exploded, one by one, down the length of the station. Nora hurled a small clay vial at the figure. It burst into blue flame, and the faceless man screamed without sound, writhing as smoke poured from the gaps in the window. The glass shattered, and he was gone. Silence returned, but not peace. Claire pulled the ledger from her bag. The cover was warm, and a new name had been written inside. The Faceless Watcher, assigned to collection. The rain outside turned to sleet, pelting the windows of the empty terminal like fingernails tapping in rhythm. Claire stared at the new entry in the ledger. The Faceless Watcher, assigned to collection. But below it, faintly etched into the parchment in smaller, uneven handwriting, was another line. Claire Ainsley, status, interference detected. She nearly dropped the book. "It knows we're resisting," she whispered. "It's adapting. Changing tactics, Nora took the ledger from her gently and examined the page. This wasn't written in the same ink. Look, she pointed to the trembling lines in the letters. This was added by something else, not the Watcher. Claire asked. Nora shook her head. No, something older, something deeper in the ledger. Ellie stepped close, staring at the page. Her face was pale, and her voice barely a whisper. There's a name written underneath yours. Very faint. Claire squinted, and for a moment she saw it too, etched so lightly that it seemed burned into the fibers of the page rather than written in ink. Aunt Margot. Claire's breath caught. She was in the ledger, she murmured. Of course she was, Nora said. That's how she knew how to fight it, how to seal it, maybe even how to survive it for so long. Claire nodded slowly. She wasn't just trying to warn people. She was recording them, hiding them between the pages. The sleet picked up intensity outside. Ellie looked out the window and frowned. We shouldn't stay here. Something's coming again. As they moved down the terminal corridor, Nora tucked the ledger into her coat. I don't think we're supposed to hold on to this. Not forever. It's too loud. What do you mean? Claire asked. It hums. We're near a breach. Like it wants to go home. They descended into the maintenance levels, where rusted doors lined narrow concrete hallways. The lights here were dim, orange, flickering. Claire paused at one marked Substation 9. A mirror leaned cracked against the wall beside it. It hadn't been there before. Inside the glass, something stirred. A hand. Small, feminine, gnarled with age, holding a candle. And then, Margot's face appeared. Not haunted, not monstrous, just sad. Then she whispered one word that chilled Claire's spine. Return. Claire dropped to one knee in front of the mirror. Margot. The name escaped her lips like a prayer. Half hope, half disbelief. The image in the cracked glass flickered, distorted by a ripple in the surface. Nora knelt beside her, eyes narrowing. Careful, that could be something wearing her. But Claire shook her head. It's her. I know it. The reflection steadied. Margot's face, pale and drawn, looked directly at Claire. Her eyes shimmered with something beyond grief, beyond time. She moved her lips again. Return the root. Claire frowned. The what? Ellie had already begun flipping through the ledger. She's talking about the first name in the book. Claire turned. The very first? Ellie nodded. Right at the front. The paper's stiff, almost brittle, like it wasn't meant to be opened often. They crowded around as Ellie slowly turned to the beginning. And there it was. Root name, Irina's soul. Found a first orchard. Claire read it aloud. The air in the corridor seemed to tighten. Irina's soul, she repeated. She's the origin. Nora stepped back. I've heard that name before. In the dream Margot wrote about. The woman with the burned hands and the white veil. Claire looked to the mirror again. Margot, do we take her out? Undo the first binding. But Margot's reflection grew more strained, as if something were pulling her backward. Return, not release, she rasped. Return her to the soil. The glass cracked down the middle, splitting her image in two. Nora grabbed Claire's shoulder. We have to move. Now. Something's coming through. Claire reached out, touched the mirror, just as it shattered, exploding outward with a shriek like tearing silk. Glass rained across the corridor. From deep behind them came a rumble, stone grinding against stone. A door had opened, but they hadn't opened it. Claire grabbed the ledger and turned the page. Irina's soul's name began to glow faintly with a dull red pulse. Bound to First Orchard. Location, beneath the mouth of mirrors. Ellie, Claire asked, breath tight. Do you know where that is? Ellie nodded. Yes. It's under the house. But we burned it. Ellie looked at her with an expression that sent ice down Claire's spine. Not deep enough. They returned to Hollow Orchard by nightfall. The road leading to the ruins had changed. Trees bent too low, roots pushed up through asphalt like bones rising from shallow graves. Fog clung to the air in thick, wet ropes, making every breath feel half-swallowed. The house was gone. Charred beams and blackened stone remained, but the structure itself had collapsed into a jagged sinkhole that hadn't been there before. A perfect circle 20 feet across. No us, no smoke, just depth. Claire stared into it. This is the mouth. Nora nodded grimly. And whatever it's hiding, it wants us to find it now. They descended slowly, the stone walls strangely smooth and spiraling downward like a carved throat. The temperature dropped with every step. No insects, no sound. Even Ellie's soft footsteps echoed unnaturally, repeating over and over again until they seemed to walk with more than three. The spiral ended at a door. It was tall, wooden, ancient, and unburned. A symbol was carved across its surface, 3 circles intersecting, stitched with root-like lines. Claire pressed a hand to it. It was warm. The ledger pulsed in her pack. Then the door creaked open without resistance. Inside was a vast underground chamber. Walls made of interlocking mirrors, thousands of them, arranged like scales on a serpent. In the center stood a tree, leafless and pale, its roots coiled around a stone slab like a strangled body. At its base lay a woman, thin, ancient, veiled in white. Her hands were blackened stumps, burned to the bone. Her mouth was sewn shut. Elle whispered, "Irina sol." Nora drew a blade of etched silver. "Do we kill her?" "No," Claire said, stepping forward. "We return her." She pulled the ledger from her pack and turned to the first page. Irina's name glowed red-hot. Claire read it aloud. "Irina sol. First root. Born a broken mirror. You are seen. You are heard. You are." She hesitated. The room shifted. The mirrors shook. Claire finished. "You are returned." The ground cracked. The roots around the slab surged downward like snakes diving into the earth. Irina's body disintegrated into dust, carried into the roots. The veiled figure smiled. Not with her lips, but through the silence that followed. And the mirrors began to go dark, one by one. Nora gasped. "It's dying." "No," Ellie said softly. "It's going home." The tree cracked in half. The chamber trembled. They ran. They barely made it out of the sinkhole before the earth convulsed. The spiral path collapsed behind them, swallowed by a roar of shifting soil. Claire, Nora, and Ellie scrambled up onto the scorched clearing just as a sound like a thunderclap, but deeper, echoed from below. Then everything went still. No wind, no night insects. Even the trees stood motionless, as if the entire world had drawn in a breath and refused to release it. Claire dropped her knees, gasping. Her hands were covered in soil and blood from cuts she hadn't noticed. "Is it over?" Nora didn't answer. She was staring back at the hole, or where it used to be. It was gone. In its place stood a smooth black stone. No siam, no mark. As if the earth had simply closed its mouth and swallowed the horror hole. Ellie walked slowly toward it. Her voice was small. That's not natural. Claire stood and approached. The stone pulsed faintly beneath her palm, like the heartbeat of a buried creature. The ledger, still clutched in her other hand, had gone cold. Silent. Then words appeared across the black stone, scrawled as if scratched by a nail. 1 root returned. 6 remain. Nora stepped back. 6. Claire opened the ledger again. The first page, the one where Irina's soul had been written, was now blank. But the next page had shifted into focus. A new name had emerged. Amos Thorne, bound to the well at Whistler's Mill. She stared at it in disbelief. They were all bound, just like Irina. Ellie looked up at her, eyes wide. "We didn't destroy the book. We activated it." Claire nodded slowly, a knot tightening in her chest. "It was never just a record. It's a key. Every name is a lock." Nora took a slow breath. "Then we have to find them. All of them." Claire traced the name on the page. "Before the wrong people do." Thunder rolled in the distance, though the sky remained clear. Claire looked at the stone one last time before turning away. The journey was far from over. The road to Whistler's Mill was long and winding, overgrown, half forgotten. Ellie found the route in a dusty roadside atlas from a gas station that didn't show up on digital maps. "This town doesn't exist anymore," she said as they sat parked beneath a canopy of drooping pine. "At least not officially." Claire studied the entry in the ledger again. Amos Thorne, bound to the well at Whistler's Mill. No date, no cause, just a name and a location. They traveled by night, headlights cutting through mist so thick it looked alive. Whistler's Mill finally appeared just before dawn, a scattering of crumbling homes, a church with shattered stained glass, and the skeleton of an old sawmill beside a brackish stream. There were no people, no sounds, just the constant hum of insects. Only they weren't quite right. Too rhythmic, too intentional. They found the well at the center of the village. It stood between three leaning cottages, its stones cracked and overgrown with ivy. The wooden cover had rotted away. Claire peered inside. It was dry, but not empty. There were steps, worn, circular stairs carved into the earth, descending into blackness. Nora unslung her flashlight. Same layout as the orchard. A spiral. It's always a spiral. Claire nodded. We're going down. Ellie paused at the edge. What if he's not like Irina? Claire looked back at her. Then we adapt. The descent was steeper than the last. The air was colder. The walls were wet, and strange chalk symbols, faded and broken, lined the stones every few feet. At the bottom of the spiral, they found a chamber. It was dry, silent. A wooden chair sat in the center of the room. On it, a man's skeleton, wrapped in rusted chains, hands nailed to the arms of the chair, eyes still open in a mummified skull. A copper medallion rested on his chest, and a name was carved into it. Amos Thorne. Claire opened the ledger. Amos Thorne, bound to the well. You are seen. You are heard. You are returned. She read the invocation again, but this time, nothing happened. Then the skeleton's jaw clicked, and it spoke. I will not go back. The sound of Amos Thorne's voice was like wood grinding against itself. Hollow, splintered, and slow. Claire instinctively stepped back, holding the ledger tightly. You were bound. We're here to release you, to return you. The corpse laughed. It echoed through the chamber in dry, choking rattles. His jaw barely moved, but the sound filled the room like smoke. I made my peace with binding. The soil cannot have me again. Nora raised her blade. What? Amos's desiccated head turned toward her, too smoothly, as if moved by unseen strings. Because I escaped the root, fought it, broke it, and for my defiance, I was chained here. Ellie stared at the rusty shackles. Who did this to you? Amos's skull tilted. Your bookkeeper. The first one. The one who spoke through mirrors. Claire's blood ran cold. Irina. No. His voice was dust and hatred. Her shadow. The one who called herself Margot. The room seemed to shrink. No. Claire whispered. She was trying to stop this. She was trying to close the doors. Amos grinned with the corners of his split lips. She was sealing us in, one by one, not out of mercy, but out of fear. Nora took a step forward. We can't leave you like this. Then kill me, Amos hissed. Let the ledger burn my name from its pages. Claire hesitated. The ledger pulsed faintly in her hand, and the page bearing Amos Thorne's name began to smear, like ink dropped into water. She felt a pull, a choice. Return him to the soil, or strike the name from the book entirely. Claire, Nora said urgently, decide now. He's fighting it. Amos's body began to rattle in its chair, bones creaking as a black mist seeped from his sockets. Burn it, he roared. Burn me, but Claire couldn't. Irina was bound. You were bound. There's a pattern, she muttered, gripping the book. Maybe Margot made choices we can't understand, but we can't erase history. We have to finish what she started. She raised the ledger. And read. Amos Thorne, you are returned. Root reclaimed. The air burst with cold. The medallion on Amos's chest melted like wax, sinking into the bones beneath. The chains dissolved into dust. His skull cracked in two, and his body collapsed into ash. A gust of wind blew upward through the well. A voice echoed faintly, not Amos's, higher, older, feminine. Two down, and then silence. Claire turned the page. A new name emerged, written in red-black ink. Verity Bell, bound to the choir of Hollow Hill. They left Whistler's Mill under a sky smeared with gray. Neither sun nor moon showed through the thick cloud cover. It felt like the world had paused, waiting, breathless, listening for the next root to stir. Claire stared at the new name in the ledger. Verity Bell, bound to the choir of Hollow Hill. Nora muttered, I don't like the word choir. Not in this context. Ellie, flipping through old local maps, found Hollow Hill marked faintly in a margin of a page labeled Abandoned Religious Sites. No road led there, just a jagged hiking trail through dense forest near a long disbanded settlement named Thorn Chapel. They hiked in under lantern light. Birdsong ceased within 100 feet of the tree line. Branches above them arched unnaturally, forming a tunnel of moss and shadow. The further they went, the more the trees leaned inward. Eventually, they came to a ridge. Below lay Hollow Hill. A ring of withered trees surrounded a clearing where a half-collapsed chapel stood. Its steeple bent like a broken finger, its roof sunken. But beneath it, embedded in the base of the hill, was a great stone mouth. It had no door, just a carved archway, inscribed with faint runes that flickered when the ledger drew near. Claire placed a hand on the stone. Music echoed faintly, like a choir humming underground, layered voices without words. Dissonant. Wrong. Nora stepped closer. We going in? Claire nodded. We have to. Inside the hill was a narrow passage that spiraled down, a familiar descent. But this time, the walls were soft, almost pulsing. The air smelled of myrrh and mildew. At the bottom, a massive chamber opened up. It resembled an amphitheater, tiered stone seats wrapped around a stage of bone-white marble. And upon the stage stood a woman in a tattered choir robe, her mouth sewn shut with black wire, her eyes glazed but watching. Dozens of other figures sat around her, robed, still, unmoving. Some were clearly long dead, their skin paper thin. Others twitched slightly as the music rose again. Claire whispered, "Verity Bell." The woman turned toward her and began to sing. Despite her sealed lips, the song surged through the chamber, filling their ears, their thoughts, their bones. It was a song of grief, a betrayal, a rot. The ledger screamed in Claire's hands. She fell to her knees. The song had no melody, just the sound of things long buried, crying to be remembered. Ellie clutched her ears. "Make it stop." Claire struggled to speak the invocation. Verity Bell, bound to choir of Hollow Hill. You are seen. The song changed, rising higher, louder, becoming sharp. Blood trickled from Claire's nose. You are heard. The choir moved in unison, hundreds of robed figures lifting invisible voices. The air itself trembled. You are... Verity raised her arms. Return. The music shattered like glass. As Claire screamed the final word, the choir fell still. The echoes of Verity Bell's unholy hymn collapsed into a suffocating silence. One by one, the robed figures slumped over where they sat, like marionettes with strings severed. And then the wires in Verity's mouth snapped. With a sickening sound, she gasped, air flooding her desiccated lungs after what must have been centuries. Her eyes, milky, mournful, met Claire's. She stepped forward, floating more than walking, arms still raised amid him. Claire held her ground. The ledger burned in her hands. Verity stopped only inches away. Her voice was a whisper, yet it filled the room like thunder. I sang because I remembered, each verse a memory sealed in flesh. But she made me forget. Claire asked softly, Who? Verity turned, pointing to the shadowed ceiling of the chamber. The one in the veil. She promised the song would keep the others quiet, that we would become the seal. We agreed. I agreed. Ellie stepped forward, trembling. You were complicit. Verity nodded, sorrowful. And now, I wish to rest. Claire looked at the ledger. Verity Bell's name now glowed red-hot on the page, the last ember of a fading flame. She spoke the final line again, softly. You are returned. Verity's body unraveled. First her skin, then her robes, then her bones, falling upward into motes of golden dust that shimmered briefly, then vanished. As they disappeared, the marble stage cracked down the center. A black vine burst from the opening and withered instantly, shriveling into nothing. The chamber rumbled. Claire grabbed Ellie and Nora. We have to go. They ran up the spiral passage, chased by the collapse of the hill. Stones tumbled from above, roots snapped and screamed, and the once silent trees groaned as if awakening from a forced slumber. They burst into the clearing just as the chapel was swallowed whole by the earth. And then, silence again. Claire opened a ledger with trembling fingers. Verity Bell's page was now blank, but a new name appeared. Elias Crane, bound to the throat of the mire. Nora let out a bitter laugh. They get worse every time. Claire whispered, "How many more?" Ellie answered without looking. 3. They traveled south, following whisper-thin lines on the map that no longer had names. Elias Crane's domain lay in what once was a swamp, long dried and buried under layers of poison land. The ledger called it the throat of the mire, but no one had called the region anything at all in over 100 years. Claire felt it long before they arrived. The air thickened, the wind refused to blow, and the soil beneath their feet turned black, moist, and hungry. They reached the mire at dusk. What remained was a massive hollow, rimmed with twisted willow trees whose limbs hung like broken arms. At the center stood a stone altar, slick with moss and dark veins pulsing beneath its surface. Around it, jagged hollows in the ground, dozens of them like open mouths, each filled with stagnant, oil-black water. Claire knelt beside the altar and opened the ledger. Elias Crane, bound to the throat of the mire. The page vibrated. Nora held her knife close. "I don't like this one." Ellie stood motionless, staring at the altar. "I hear something. A voice." "No, voices." Claire frowned. "I hear it too." They spoke together, dozens of overlapping whispers. "You've come too late. You always come too late." He already spoke. Suddenly, a spout of liquid blackness exploded from the center of the altar, splashing the surrounding roots. From it, a shape emerged. No bones, no skin, just oozing form, vaguely human, glistening and twitching. Elias Crane. His voice gurgled, like something trying to remember how to speak. "You shouldn't have found me." Claire stood her ground. "We're returning the roots. The bindings end here." But Elias didn't flinch. "I'm not bound. I am fed. The throat consumes what you discard." As he spoke, one of the black pools nearby shuddered. Something pale rose to the surface, a human hand, then slipped back down. Ellie's voice cracked. "Oh my God, he's been feeding the mire. People. Lives." Elias spread his arms. "You think the others suffered. I thrived." The ledger pulsed harder, its page slick with some unseen moisture. The text blurred and warped as if trying to sink. Claire screamed the invocation. Elias Crane, bound to the throat of the mire. "You are seen." Elias laughed, bubbling. "I see you. You are heard." The pools around them boiled. "You are." Nora stabbed the altar. It cracked. "Return." A great howl rose from the depths, like the swamp itself screaming. Elias thrashed, tearing open at the chest. A vine of shadow pulled itself from his throat and vanished into the black pools. Then silence. Elias Crane collapsed into formless muck. The altar crumbled. Claire opened the ledger again. Elias's name was gone, and in its place, Agnes Flint, bound to the window between sleep. They left the mire broken and soaked in silence. Agnes Flint's name glared from the ledger like an open eye. No location, no map, just a title. Bound to the window between sleep. What does that mean? Ellie asked, clutching her jacket tightly. Where is she? Claire turned the page. Nothing. Maybe it's not a place, Nora muttered. Maybe it's a state. They set up camp just outside the last known boundary of the mire. Claire, exhausted, sat cross-legged near the fire, the ledger open in her lap. It says sleep. We might have to go into it. Nora raised a brow. What, like dream walking? Claire didn't answer. Her eyes were already drifting shut. Ellie caught her before she fell sideways. But Claire wasn't unconscious. She was already gone. She awoke standing on a shoreline beneath a sky that pulsed like a slow heartbeat. Stars moved like eyes. The sea was still, black, dead. Behind her stood a small, Victorian bedroom, impossibly out of place. The walls were scorched, and the mirror was covered with a red veil. The bed was occupied. Claire stepped closer. A woman lay curled in the center, aged but not decomposed. Her hands were folded tightly across her chest, lips sealed with red thread. Agnes Flint. From the shadows, a voice whispered, "Don't wake her." Claire turned. A little girl stood at the window, face blurred, flickering like a candle flame. "Why not?" Claire asked, stepping carefully. "Because she keeps them in," the girl whispered. "She's the last lock. If you break it before you're ready, they all get out." Claire frowned. "Who gets out?" The girl pointed toward the sea. Beneath the waves, something shifted. A face, then another. Hundreds, pressed just under the surface, watching, straining against the water. "I don't understand," Claire whispered. "You will," the girl replied, tilting her head. "When you open the window." The red veil over the mirror fluttered without wind. Claire approached it slowly. The ledger appeared in her hands, trembling. She opened it to Agnes Flint's page. The ink writhed. Agnes's eyes opened. She didn't scream, but her thoughts flooded Claire's mind like an avalanche of ice. "I was the first to see the root. I refused to serve it. So I slept, eternally." To hold it shut, Claire raised the ledger and began the invocation. "Agnes Flint, you are seen. You are heard." The mirror shattered. All light went out, and from the waves, something began to rise. The sea groaned like a dying god. Claire stood in the darkness where the mirror had shattered, the shards suspended in air around her like drifting teeth. From the water's edge, massive hands began to crawl upward, long fingers made of bone and root, gnarled and dripping with black ichor. Agnes Flint floated above the bed now, her hair cascading upward like she was underwater, though there was no sea in the room, only the memory of it. Her mouth opened, and from it spilled a song that sounded like children humming in reverse. Claire gripped the ledger tighter. "I'm trying to help you." The little girl at the window had vanished. The shoreline split, revealing a stairway of glass leading down into the ocean. Claire descended without thinking. Each step echoed behind her like someone, or something, was following. Below, she found herself in a submerged ballroom. Chandelier vines curled downward like jellyfish. Corpses danced slowly in pairs. Their faces were stitched into smiles, their feet dragging across a flooded floor that shimmered without depth. And at the center, Agnes's twin, or what remained of her. "Welcome," the reflection hissed. To the dream she dared lock away. Claire circled warily. "You're not real. I'm the mirror girl. I'm the part she tore off and buried so the others wouldn't hear it breathing." The twin floated forward, skin translucent, bones flickering beneath like cracks in glass. "She didn't just sleep," the twin whispered. "She suppressed. All the screams, all the whispers, all the roots." The room rumbled. From a ceiling above, if there still was a ceiling, hundreds of vines reached down, snapping like whips, striking the dancers until they collapsed, twitching. "You're going to read the name," the twin said. Claire raised the ledger. "Agnes Flint," she began, voice shaking, bound to the window between sleep. The twin smile cracked open. "You are seen." The walls bled. "You are heard." Claire turned, just in time to see Agnes, the real Agnes, fall from the air. Her body struck the floor with a crash that shook the entire dreamscape. And then she breathed. The vines shrieked. The ledger burned in Claire's hands as she screamed the final word. "Return." The mirror reformed behind her, but now it showed Claire's reflection, eyes black, mouth shut tight with red thread. She awoke back at the fire, gasping. Nora and Ellie grabbed her shoulders. "You stopped breathing," Ellie said. For almost a minute, Claire opened the ledger with trembling hands. Agnes Flint's name had vanished, and in its place, written not in ink but something like ashes. "Bound to the root crown." Nora swallowed. "That's it, isn't it?" Claire nodded slowly. The final one. The final name had no name. Just a mark, a spiraling glyph drawn in ash and vein. It pulsed slowly, like a breath being held beneath the earth. Claire traced it with her finger, and the page burned cold. Ellie murmured, "What does bound to the root crown mean?" Nora answered quietly, "It means we've reached the heart. No map led them to it. No campispan." Instead, Claire followed the pull, the invisible thread that ran from her spine down into the land like a tether. They walked for what felt like days, though the sun never moved and the birds never sang. Eventually, the trees ended. What remained was a crater, mile wide, perfectly circular. At the center stood a single, twisted monolith of bark and bone, taller than any tower, its roots burrowed deep and wide. Around it, the land was warped, flowers growing backward, water flowing upward in spiral columns, time staggering in fits. A deer passed them with no face. A man's shadow flickered across the sky like smoke, though there was no man to cast it. The root crown was awake. Nora whispered, "This is older than everything, older than language." Claire approached the monolith. The ledger shook in her hands like a dying thing. The glyph on the final page began to spin. Then came the voice, not from the stone, not from the earth, but from everywhere. "You have returned what was buried, unsealed what was locked, fed the soil the names it once swallowed." Claire stood tall. "I'm finishing it." "You are finishing yourself." A tendril erupted from the ground and struck the ledger. The book split open, pages flying, each one bearing a name they'd released. Verity Bell, Elias Crane, Agnes Flint. The wind carried them upward, and from a monolith, a shape stepped free. The root crown was not a person, not a god. It was a mouth, a collective being made of all the others, faces swirling within its bark, limbs grown from 1,000 regrets, and eyes that opened across its torso, blinking in staggered rhythm. "You are not bound," Claire said, "but you can be." The root crown laughed, and the land quaked. "I am the ledger. I am the names. I am the silence between them. You carried me all this way like a lantern, never knowing it was fire." The glyph spun faster. Ellie screamed, "Claire, look!" Her arm, where she'd held the ledger all this time, was changing, veins blackening, skin cracking into bark. "You've been marked since the beginning," the root crown whispered. That book was not a key. It was a seed. Claire fell to her knees. Nora caught her. "What do we do?" Ellie flipped through the final scattered pages. There, at the back, written in Claire's own handwriting, though she'd never written it. Claire Voss, bound to the root crown. Claire stumbled back, staring at her name on the page. It wasn't possible. She hadn't written it. She couldn't have. I'm not." Her voice cracked, dried at the edges like old paper. "That's not me." But the bark spreading up her arm said otherwise. The root crown loomed, vines curling in and out of itself like serpents tangled in a bloodied knot. From its core, a single human face stared out, the only one not writhing or vanishing into the bark. Claire's own. The voice returned, quiet and cold. "You were the last tenant. The empty house. The waiting soil. They all prepared the room, and you moved in." "No," Ellie said, stepping between them. "She fought this. All of it. She put them back." The root crown pulsed. She gathered them, reseeded the field. "We could not rise without the names returned. You helped us bloom." Nora's blade was already in her hand. "Then we'll cut the root out." But when she lunged, the earth swallowed her. She didn't even scream. Claire cried out, but the root crown was speaking again, now in every voice Claire had ever heard on the journey. Verity's choir, Elias's hunger, Agnes's dreams, all echoes of you. We waited for your ripening. Claire opened the ledger with trembling hands. It bled from the spine. Her name was pulsing now, line by line, like a countdown. Ellie grabbed her shoulders. "Claire, listen to me. If this is true, if you're part of it, you can still choose what to do with it." "I don't know how," Claire whispered. Her fingertips were no longer skin, just root and ash. "You do," Ellie insisted. "You've spoken the names. You've unbound them. Now bind yourself." Claire looked down at the final invocation. It was different, longer. Not just 3 lines, but a dozen. A ritual not to return, but to contain. To trap the root crown and herself with it. "You'll be sealing yourself inside," Ellie said softly. "Forever." Claire nodded. "It's what the others tried to do. They weren't strong enough. But now, they've given me everything." The root crown writhed. "You will become the soil, the silence." The next seed, Claire stood, bark cracking, blood turning to sap. And then she spoke, not reading, but invoking from within. "I am seen. I am heard. I am bound. I carry the burden. I open the ledger. I close the ledger. I remember. I forget. I become the lock. I become the key. I speak the final name. And I silence it forever. The ledger burst into flame, black fire with no smoke. The root crown screamed, not aloud, but in the trees, the dirt, the bones of the world. Claire walked forward and stepped into it, and the world sealed behind her. The monolith was gone. One moment, it had loomed, colossal, ancient, hungry. The next, there was only a ring of charred earth and silence, so deep it seemed to hum. Nora clawed her way from the soil where the root crown had thrown her. Mud caked her eyes, blood soaked her collar. Ellie helped her to her feet, barely steady herself. Claire was gone. There wasn't even a scorch mark where she'd stood. The ledger had vanished too. They waited minutes, hours, maybe days. Time had unraveled here, and there was no compass to tell them what direction grief pointed. She did it, Ellie whispered, staring at the empty crater. She sealed it. Nora nodded slowly. But she's still in there. They buried nothing. There was nothing to bury. But they left a marker at the center of the ring. Claire's scarf, woven through the branches of a dead tree, a silent banner that whispered to the wind. When they made their way back to town, the air was lighter. The houses no longer wept. The tenant names, those few they had recorded, no longer echoed through the fog. People had forgotten. The town's curse had become a dull ache, the kind you feel when waking from a bad dream you can't quite recall. But not Ellie, not Nora. They remembered everything. Months passed, then a year. Nora resumed her job at the historical archive, cataloging truths nobody would read. Ellie moved into Claire's old apartment. She never redecorated. She said she liked the way it remembered, and every night, before sleep, she would set an empty journal on her nightstand. One day, maybe it might fill itself again. Epilogue. On a quiet night in midwinter, a child walked into the woods near the old boundary where the mire once began. He didn't mean to go far, but something pulled at him. In the center of a clearing, he found a black flower growing from the frozen soil. It was beautiful and blooming. The boy reached down. A voice whispered, not aloud but inside him, "I am seeing the end."